What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Good Anime Palette Podcast. This is episode number 95, where we go over all of the awesome new anime that's coming out for fall 2024. Joining me on this escapade is none other than one of your co-hosts, Jason, myself, and joining me, as always, as usual, is none other than my Cape Crusader, my partner in crime, Will. What's up, buddy?
I don't think either of us are in like 100% good form right now because we had a pretty heavy day yesterday. We were celebrating a friend's birthday, and it being a free flow boozy brunch, I think we definitely slammed the sakes a bit hard.
Did you actually notice that they had to close the door and the curtains because
we were loud
being,
as fuck?
Yeah, we were being obnoxiously loud. Yeah.
I mean, when you have like 20 people like holed up in a room, as private as can be, you're going to be noisy. Right, and therefore, like, you don't want to disturb the other guests there on the outside. So, apologies for any noise. I'm not going to name the restaurant because I don't want to put them under fire. But yeah, no, it was a good time. But that does mean that both Jason and I are we could be better. But that doesn't mean that the quality of our recording of our episode is going to drop. We're going to maintain high levels, high energy, enthusiasm, because fall 2024 is a stacked season, and we have plenty to break down and talk about. So, how should we go about doing this first? Because let's be real.
Yeah, okay.
A lot of the things there that are out in the open for people to watch was kind of tough for us to watch simply because we, as much as love watching anime, reading manga, we can't watch everything. And there's going to be a trend right off the bat that people will notice of how the shows have been put together for fall 2024. In that there are a lot of sequels, threequels, a lot of continuations, a lot of reimaginings and re-edits of old series yonder and all that. So there are going to be a lot of things that we're not going to be able to fully break down and talk about, but we'll still be able to give our 2 cents just because of the fact that even if we haven't watched everything up to current, or if we haven't even started some of these series, it's not too hard to talk about and also see what kind of people would be interested in said show.
Yeah.
So we should be all right.
Yeah, I mean, one of our one of our BPs where we talked about sequelitis when we kind of was looking forward to see what fall 2024 was installed. I think a lot of people had a lot of downloads, a lot of plays.
Yeah.
So then they were very, very keen on hearing what fall 2024 was all about, whether it's from us or from just everyone in general. So here it is, the motherlode for everyone.
Yeah. It's not going to be like a strategizing kind of thing in terms of like how you go about watching anime this season. It's quite simple. If you've been following up with a certain series and it's on its second or third season, then you're probably going to watch it.
Or the 7th.
Yeah, no, or the 7th.
Yeah.
I thought that one was on its 8th season.
No, number 7. Whoa. Because they had like a bunch of like movies and OVA specials in between for Natsume.
Yeah, no, I felt like that thing has been running for fucking ever.
It is.
So it actually is crazy that it's only on the 7th season.
So that being said, though, before we get into
the last thing that came out was a movie. Okay, yeah, that's why. So so it actually preserved things. Okay, got it.
I think they had to like realign things. Anyways, let's actually go over a little bit before we go into each individual shows that we want to talk about. A little bit of the overarching observations that we saw about this season, as well as the revival of our seasonal bet. So, for those of you who did not listen to our BP where we talked about sequelitis and our seasonal bet, Will and I just did a very quick kind of bet, which was basically the traditional tried and true thing of number of 8.0 shows on my anime list.
So I went with 8 and under. Jason went with 9 and over. At the moment, we are sitting pretty at 8 shows that are 8 and up. So far, that is Bleach. I'm not going to name like whatever season. I'm just going to say the property itself. So Dandadan, ReZero, Natsume's Book of Friends, Orb, Bleach, Blue Blocks, Shangri-La Frontier, and Dragon Ball Daima. Yep. There are a few other series that are very close to breaching into the 8s. That would be Daimachi, that would be Rurouni Kenshin, as well as Ranma Half. Love Live is lagging a little bit at 7.8, but I would not doubt that Love Live breaches the 8.00 mark.
So already, as you can tell from the number of 8.0 shows, like right this moment as of recording, this is a pretty crazy or if you might say, pretty standard fall season. So, when we were talking about sequelitis, I mean, again, we might be retreading like old grounds, but the number of sequels this season and the number of crazy shows and revivals and remakes and returning to form shows this season is quite intense.
What I would say is, whilst this is great for people who are like massive fans of these like long-running properties, right? Like Ranma and Dragon Ball have been around since the 80s, right? Dragon Ball might even be like further than that. And then you also have the tried and true of like Danmachi, ReZero, Bleach, Natsume Book of Friends. What that does make it very apparent, though, is that we are in a very top-heavy anime season, in that a lot of the sequels and a lot of the remakes are going to be propping up the high scores on my anime list. So, of course, you would expect Bleach to get a 9, no matter what, unless it was the first ever season that came out in 2006, right? Anything else that came afterwards, with the 1,000-Year Blood War, is going to be an 8.90 upwards.
Well, now that you said that, now I'm super curious. What was the first season of Bleach's MAL score as of right now?
I would have to look it up, but
I'll look it up.
Once you look it up. So what I was trying to go with is that it's not all that bad, of course, that you have all these sequels coming out. The problem, though, is that if you're not watching those sequels, if you're not watching the remakes, right, stuff that has already existed or has been redone, it does make it a little bit difficult to navigate this season in terms of looking for brand new series to watch.
Right.
Of course, you'll have things like Orb, you'll have things like Uzumaki, you'll have things like Blue Box, especially since we talked about them for our ASAP, and like we were already like anticipating those were going to be doing quite well, except maybe Nina the Starry Bride. But overall, if you were just to go into the season and you've not watched things like Rurouni Kenshin or Danmachi or MF Ghost, Arifureta, and so, it can be kind of tough to try and pick something to watch. A lot of the stuff that's like propping up, like I think it's like only 5 or maybe even 6 series that are completely brand new. Like no pre-existing anime, no OVAs or movies. It's just like the first completely brand new season of something, and it can be a good or bad thing. It means that like if you are a hardcore fan of these long-standing seasons, long-standing series, perfect. You've been waiting a long time for more Seven Deadly Sins. You've been waiting for a long time for more MF Ghost or so on and so forth. But on the inverse, if you have not watched any of those, it's slim pickings.
I mean, there are still really good shows, which we will get into. But yeah, so first of all, to reiterate, Will, the first season of Bleach, 366 episodes, Studio Pierrot, fall 2004, 7.95.
Which actually is higher than the manga. The manga was a 7.88.
Popularity 36 with 2 million members. So there you go.
Yeah, but now we're talking about like all the all the shows that came up afterwards in terms of like I don't even know how many arcs there are going to be of the 1,000-Year Blood War. But right now,
I don't know either.
Right now, it's a 9.06. The Separation, which is the preceding arc for the 1,000-Year Blood War, that was an 8.7. The first season of 1,000-Year Blood War was a 9.01.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a really return to form. But to kind of go off of what Will has said, there is, if you count remakes or like revival of IPs, for example, like Dragon Ball Daima or Ranma have into what I'm about to say, there is almost at least 25 of these sequels, remakes, reimaginings, or revivals, if you will. So if we go by our regular kind of count of how many series there are every single season, it's roughly like 40, 50.
Yep.
So that's almost half.
And the other thing as well, like, just to sort of like really home in terms of things being really top heavy, if you were to remove Blue Box and Orb, I know of course I'm skewing the
What about
data
Dandadan?
And Dandadan, right? You remove those 3, right? Because those were the most hyped. That's why we covered them for our ASAP, right? If you were to remove those from the score from like this season's entries,
God,
the next highest brand new show is You Are
My Servant
at 7.39.
Holy shit.
So this is what I mean in terms of it being super, super top heavy. A lot of the sequels, a lot of the remakes are carrying the weight of like the anime view time for this season. other than that, like right afterwards,
That's
it's
15 shows,
Yeah.
not including the 3 you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So that's 15 shows before we get to the You Are My Servant, right? Obviously, we're excluding the top 3 originals, right? Or Dandadan and Blue Box, but that's crazy. That's just insane.
And then right after that, then you have things like Blue Exorcist, you have Tower of God, you have Gungyo Online 2, you have Yakuza Fiance, you have Spirit Chronicles. Still a lot of sequels that are sort of propping up how many people are watching anime this season. And look, it doesn't mean, of course, that like, oh no, we should just not release this many sequels, this many remakes in one go. But it does make it really difficult as someone who is maybe a newcomer or someone who's not like that steadfast in watching all these long-running series. It becomes very difficult for somebody to just come in and pick something to watch, because if you were to want to watch like some of the hard and heavy stuff, bro, you got to watch like 360 plus episodes of original Bleach, followed by 2 arcs of the 1,000-Year Blood War, and then start watching this current arc of the 1,000-Year Blood War.
I think if I were to kind of summarize this whole season in basically a sentence or two, what I would say is this is what we call a reminder season, because it's like reminding you that, oh, remember Bleach? Here it is. Do you remember Dragon Ball? Here it is. Do you remember Arifureta? Here it is.
Do you remember Natsume Book of Friends? Because the last thing they came out, which is the movie, was 2018.
Yeah. So I always, I mean, just like how sequels is, it is a reminder of, oh, right, the show that you liked, and then maybe it's time to catch up on it. Maybe not this particular season right now, but it's like, oh, you're right, there's that show. Maybe I should, finish it, or, finish all the other preceding seasons. So that being said, though, there is still some gems within this fall season, and we are definitely going to go into it. But before we get into those crazy bangers, let's go a little bit over some of the sequels. Will, what would the sequels that you want to talk about first?
So in terms of like the clear like winners, right? Like this is like no shit. People are going to be super hyped and interested in. As mentioned, the third part of Bleach 1,000-Year Blood War is doing gangbusters right now. It's I think at the moment with its score, it puts it at top 4, which is crazy. I mean, in terms of looking at the top anime across everything, you would never have been able to sort of imagine, like maybe 10 years ago, that you would have Frieren, followed by Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, followed by Steins Gate, right? Those two, after Frieren, have been at the top for the longest fucking time. And then it's Bleach, 1,000-Year Blood War Part 3. Then you have Gintama. Then you have Attack. So like, it's actually it's great to see that the Bleach fans are getting what they want. That they're getting more anime done well, right? The fact that it had gotten so much shit for, I guess, how the preceding arcs were handled, especially having run for well over 360 episodes, things can get kind of stale. So it's good to see that, as much as I'm not the biggest of Bleach fans, especially after the Aizen arc, it was very difficult to keep reading that. But yeah, they've been redeemed. I think that it's a good comeback story for the whole Bleach franchise. Then you have ReZero, which I think it took a little bit of time for the next arc to come out, because I think season 2 part 2 last came out over 3 years ago. January 2021. So winter 2021 was the last time we saw anything ReZero. So well over a 3.5 year wait for anything else to come out for the ReZero franchise, and you can already see 8.93. This is already a half point higher than the preceding season of 8.43. So again, I don't like ReZero. I know a lot of people do.
I don't really have a huge fondness for ReZero either. I did watch the first season. I thought it was aight. That's really it.
I just don't like Subaru. And if I don't like the main character, it's very difficult for me to continue watching.
I also don't drive a Subaru either, so, there's that too.
Yeah. But you have been you are a Natsume Book of Friends fan, though.
Yeah,
right?
So let's actually, shall we get into the reviews? Shall we go knee deep into the thing, or do you sort of have any observations you want to have before we get into the tried and true nitty gritty reviews?
Straight up, Shangri-La Frontier still doing well. Danmachi still doing well. Rurouni Kenshin, it's good that the remakes are being well received. I'm not going to say anything about Love Live because if I do say anything, one, I'm not a fan, so I don't want the fans to come after me. Ari Fordetta, congratulations. You guys have a season 3. It's doing decently. Blue Lock, you might want to talk a bit about that one because I think you have watched season 1, and therefore you would have more to say about how Blue Lock versus Under 20 Japan is going to at least perform for this season.
Yeah, all I have to say, because this is not going to be a review of season 2, but just sort of my, I guess you could say, disappointment is the production value of Blue Lock season 1 versus season 2 has significantly changed,
which is weird because it's still 8-bit. It's still the same studio. So I wonder what happened midway in terms of like actually getting the second season up off the ground. Because Blue Lock, the first season, came out actually quite a while ago. I think it came out 2 years ago. Exactly 2 years ago. So especially when you have such a hot property, it does seem a bit weird that it took this long for the second season to come out. So do you feel like maybe it's just like, people having waited too long and then seeing this being not as hype as the first season? That's why the score disparity is massive, going from an 8.23 for season 1 down to a 7.44 for season 2. Like, did you watch any of this season?
I like briefly skimmed
just
it
to see, but it was enough for you to notice that there was a big difference in terms of the production and how it presented itself as an anime for this season.
Yeah, and I understand when people sort of say, hey, who gives a shit about the production value? Hey, okay, it has a dip in quality, but it's not that bad. Or, hey, they had to put some 3D stuff, or maybe they're on budget constraints or whatever. Like, I get that. I really do. But it's kind of like, well, if you like that, if you're, in support of that, then you should like One Punch Man Season 2. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Okay, you might even say, hey, I'll even throw you a bone that says it's not the same studio. Sure. But still, you should still like it because the content, the storyline of Season 2 is still based on the manga, right? So why don't everyone love Season 2 like they did Season 1? So you can't sort of have your cake and eat it too and say production does not matter when it comes to anime, because it does.
It also shouldn't be like using MAL stats to be like the defining way of you determining if something is going to be good or bad, right? Because look, you have the numbers, you have the stats that at least give you an idea of how most people feel about it, but that doesn't mean that like this is the only way for you to perceive whether an anime is good or not.
Yeah, and also we might say this is shit, or a certain anime community or online community say this is shit, or Reddit says it's shit, but then it gets a season 2. Or it doesn't matter because everyone watches it anyways, or merchandise sales justifies it for getting another season. There's always going to be some reason somewhere with some metrics that we do not have. But based on what I saw very briefly, it is a big, in my opinion, a change in quality, and it is a bit unfortunate because for those who do like soccer, or who likes soccer but not realistic like Aoashi, it is a bit of a disappointment. But beyond that, it's still fine, in my opinion.
I think that the thing that makes it tough for Blue Lock, and obviously like Blue Lock is already popular enough. When I was in Japan last month, like I definitely saw a fair amount of ads for it in Hong Kong when I'm on
it's
YouTube.
On the tram too.
Yeah, when I'm in Hong Kong, like there's definitely, because a lot of these like anime series do like cup noodle collaborations. There was a cup noodle collaboration with Blue Lock.
Yep,
right, and that's been running in Hong Kong YouTube ads for quite
and
a
on
while.
TV. Yeah, so it's clearly left a mark, and who knows? Maybe they think, okay, because we have it locked.
Yeah.
Sorry, no pun intended.
No pun intended.
We have it on lock, so therefore we don't need to put that much resources in, because season 1 does look very expensive, I'll be honest.
I think the issue that it has, and this is obviously just a nitpick, but it straddles the line between being a sports anime and a shonen anime.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
And therefore, it's like, if you're not going to go balls deep in either one, how do you balance it out so that you can get both sets of fans in? And I think very clearly from watching season 1, or even just reading the manga like we did before, it's clear that the sport is secondary, and that the shonen death game arc is trope is a bit more of the focus.
Yeah.
And so I think that could be a detriment in its own. It could also work well if they manage to pull off whatever comes out for the rest of the season and the subsequent seasons. Because I don't think that like after this one that it's one and done. I think that there's definitely enough popularity, enough hype for it to continue having more seasons. I think you just have to be very careful in terms of, if you're going to not focus that much on the sports side, then you really have to go down heavy on the shonen aspect to be able to retain that amount of attention and continued viewership.
Yeah, it's the whole master, jack of all trades, master of none, right? And also, Blue Lock also had a successful spin-off, the Nagi movie that's going to be on Crunchyroll soon, and that's been airing, I think, elsewhere. So it is a very successful IP, and obviously the manga is still running and doing well.
Yep.
So there's no doubt about that. But obviously, for a lot of people, especially on the Western side, it is the anime that is on the forefront. And I just have to say that, as well as I am gonna watch it at some point, I am not dying to watch it right now. And I think a lot of people, especially with the scores, reflect on that, and a lot of people have been criticizing the animation quality. So even though we did spend a lot of time talking about Blue Lock when I thought I said a very short and sweet kind of summary, that is how I feel about Blue Lock overall.
Yeah. Now let's actually talk about some seasonals that we actually did watch.
Did you watch Gun Gale?
I did. I watched episode 1 of Gun Gale. I know there's 3 episodes out, but I didn't necessarily need to use the 3-episode rule to determine whether or not this is something that's good to watch. So just to sort of give a little bit of a preamble into Gun Gale Online, it has been 6 years since the last season the first season.
Rokunen.
Yeah, it's been a long, long time. So that one came out in the spring of 2018. There is, of course, another difference. The first season was done by Studio 3 Hertz. I think we might want to talk a bit more about what happened to 3 Hertz afterwards. But instead of it being 3 Hertz, it is now done by A1 Pictures. So everything is kind of aligning under the A1 umbrella now, right? So not only is the original Sword Art Online series, along with all their other movies and ONAs stuff being produced by that studio, so is Gun Gale Online. At least going forward, it should be that way. So Gun Gale Online Season 2, to give a sort of a little bit of a perspective on how Season 1 did at the time, and it's still now. The first season had a score of a 7.01. Second season at the moment is a 7.29. Now this is all based off of the ongoing light novel series of the same name by Keiichi, who did the story, and Kuroboshi Kohaku, who did the art. So that light novel is still ongoing, running at around a 7.6, very respectable score. I watched all of Gun Gale Online because it was part of our Gotta Watch Them All. Right?
Yep.
And at the time when I gave my review, I said that it was definitely a worthwhile kind of side quest, but excuse me, anybody that's played any sort of RPGs or any kind of open world games, you know what side quests are. They're not necessary to the main story. They're just a little fun aside, and you can choose to do them whenever the hell you want. So there was never really much of a sort of time pressure for people to watch Season 1, especially because after Season 1 came out, it took 6 years for them to come up with Season 2. I enjoyed watching Season 1, and so I was kind of curious as well. With the way that Season 1 ended, it seemed to be kind of like a full wraparound, that if you watched all 12 episodes of the first season, that was it. That was all you needed, and it was a fun time. But let's get back onto SAO. Now that we actually have Season 2 of Gun Gale Online, where is this story going to go? Obviously, they're going to be continuing what's happening in the light novel because it's still ongoing. I'd say first things first, in terms of the animation quality, and this is not a slate against A1, I think that the art and the production, in comparison to Season 1, the changes are very minimal. In that I don't think that there was actually much need to sort of amp up the animation quality, the way that the characters looked. In fact, I think it was pretty much if you put them side by side, it would be very hard to discern any differences between the 3 Hertz production alongside the A1 production.
So going off of that, as Will mentioned earlier, so first of all, I want to say several things. As we mentioned in the very beginning of this episode, Will and I are kind of a little bit under the weather and a bit sick, but that doesn't mean we're stopping anything. It's just please forgive us for the occasional cough and maybe our breathing, because we are recovering from a bit of a cold and a flu situation and hungoverness. However, anything you want to say about that, Will?
I was going to say, emphasis on the hungoverness.
Yeah, emphasis on the hungoverness. However, going back to Gun Gale, the thing about 3 Hertz, as we mentioned in our one of our previous episodes about IP handovers, Studio 3 Hertz is currently no more. They have been liquidated, and they have sold their properties to a bunch of different people. And obviously, Gale got purchased by A1 Pictures, which is very appropriate because they are essentially the Sword Art Online people.
Yep.
That being said, we don't know exactly. I mean, we could, if you really want to go nitty gritty into like, oh, if the staff got transferred over or how much of it was completed, because this studio liquidation of 3 Hertz was done very, very close to the premiere of the season. So it could very well be there's a certain amount of episodes already done in the pipeline, ready to go, or a lot of it has been laid out, and then, hey, all of a sudden the company went under. A1, hold the torch and keep it going. So we don't know to what extent
there was the A1 touch on it,
exactly.
Right?
So when Will says, "Oh, the quality is the same," maybe it's because it's just at that like in between area where they have the first couple of episodes, because there's only just the first couple of episodes right now, right?
We also don't know how long this liquidation process had been going on in the background either.
Yeah.
Right. So we actually don't know if this was just something that sprung up in the past couple of months. It could have been running for a year or two beforehand. Because 3 Hertz did release a few things, prior, but it's also just like them doing a lot of independent stuff, them doing a lot of originals. It was always kind of hard to really see like when they were going to start picking up some more long-running series, right? In fact, actually, the last production that they did was the second season of the Demon Lord, the Devil's a Part-Timer, and that came out last summer.
Yeah.
Summer 2023.
And usually with these kinds of foreclosures, bankruptcies, Chapter 11 refiling, although that's American law, you can see a trajectory. Like, this doesn't just randomly happen overnight. It can happen overnight, but it usually is like...
You could see like a bankruptcy or liquidation coming from a mile
or like
away.
your stock decreases, or like you're starting laying off people. Like, it's not hard.
Like, if you're not gaslighting yourself or anybody else, like, you know that there is going to be something going on in the background. And also, just to be very clear, I think as you were talking about liquidating assets and all that, right? So back in June of this year, it was announced that A1 Pictures would acquire Studio 3 Hertz production, which means that basically everything that they've been working on will now be under the A1 Pictures roof.
Okay.
Now, we do not know that if A1's going to take everything and continue as business as usual, they may end up actually then, passing on certain properties. Like, for example, like Devil's a Part-Timer, right? Who knows if that is going to be done fully in-house by A1 Pictures. They might actually end up just extending that to somebody else to do.
Because they just own the IP. Maybe they own... Hey, maybe it's when they say they got the production, it could just be the production of the IP and the anime, or it could even include the staff. Or maybe they have the whole thing and then they lay off the staff. Unfortunately, that's just the way it goes with acquisitions and mergers. However, it is good to know that at least the quality has not dipped, right? As you said, the quality is the same. What about the storyline?
The storyline is
because when you watch Gale Online 1, you told me, if my memory is as clear as it can be, you were like, hey, it's a cool side quest, it's a cool side story. It wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst. Cool. Then all of a sudden season 2 got announced and you're like, what the fuck?
So basically it's very much self-contained. It follows like a big bad, but then the big bad turns out to be kind of just somebody who wanted love and attention in the game, but they were just sort of
don't we all want?
They were
love and
exacting
attention?
their sort of like masochistic tendencies within the game. So where season 2 is going to go, it's kind of hard to say because I only watched episode 1, right? But
Still.
What I would say is, it's still going to be entertaining. It's still going to be high octane. The pink P90 is going to be there no matter what, because you can't have Gale Online without the P90.
That's all that matters to me.
And I don't think that this is something that if you are already watching Gale Online or even like an SAO fan, that you should pass up. Don't let the score kind of sway you. Like, yes, okay. 79,000 members, putting it at like 2,500 for popularity, just over 3,000 in terms of its ranking. The raw score of 7.29. In all respects, for the scores it has, that's a pretty decent stat.
It's fine. Honestly, it really is fine. And obviously, as the more seasons come out, and obviously as the season ends, there's obviously going to be a reshift of scores. It always happens. So who knows where it goes? I mean, Will and I, before the recording, spoiler alert for a future prediction, The Fable, you might remember, is a manga that Will loves to bits. I like it a lot. I didn't binge it and finished it yet.
But we also did have an issue in terms of anything that is seinen and that would be turned into an anime by Tezuka Productions usually ends up being kind of mid to what the hell were they thinking.
Future spoiler alert, My Wife Has No Emotions is going to be mentioned in a later episode.
Yeah. But on the Fable, when we were talking about it, it was like low 7s, high 6s, and we were just like, well, we love the anime. We love the manga the bits. So we can excuse the poor showing that it has in terms of Mal.
Oh, it's a My Home Hero type thing again.
And then, as we're compiling some data for today's episode, I looked back and was like, I wonder how the Fable's doing. Just because I was looking at like preceding seasons, and then turns out that it's now an 8.03.
Yeah, that's just honestly kind of crazy. So that just really goes to show the huge shift after an anime has finished running its course for its current season and the readjustment of scores that people have because, as you might expect, a lot of people only add their scores at the end when they finish everything or they drop it.
Yeah, so don't let the at-a-glance kind of stat viewing sway you. Yes, 7.29 is definitely not the highest, but it is a significant improvement upon the first season. So if it was to continue this trajectory, I would imagine that this would end somewhere at around a 7.3 to 7.4, which is a very good showing for a sequel that improves on season 1 and also had a 6-year wait for something to come out.
And so hopefully the consistency kind of lasts throughout the season and that the acquisition doesn't really affect it or affects it for the better, right?
Yeah. Well, it depends. I think that, with the slate that A1 Pictures has right now, and then bring on Gunga Online and potentially bring on Devil's a Part-Timer, who knows how they're going to be able to handle and manage all the works under their roof. So whether or not there will be a season 3 of Gunga Online, it depends on what they actually do with SAO, right? Because if you really want to be honest with yourself, SAO definitely takes precedence over anything, right? So Gunga Online is going to be on the side, which means we might be expecting another 2 to 3 year wait before anything else comes out.
Yep, let's hopefully we hear something from SAO. But what you also probably would hear from me this time, it's a season 7 of a show. None other than one of my favorite back burner Iyashike shows of all time, Natsume Book of Friends. Season 7, based on the ongoing manga series of Yuki Midori Kawa, who did the story and the art. First published in eons ago. Published in English by Viz Media. It is premiered on October 8th. Produced by Studio Shuka, who also did Season 5 onwards. So Brains-based at Season 1 and 4, and Season 5 onwards, including the movies and the OVAs, are done by Shuka. Has a score of 8.58 right now. Rank 104, popularity 4196, and obviously the manga has a really high score of 8.67, rank 66. Now,
as an aside, I talked to you about this yesterday when we were at the brunch.
Mm-hmm.
On my way back to Hong Kong, I was on a quick trip to Bangkok, Thailand this past weekend, and on the plane back from Thailand, half the plane was watching an anime. And I was wondering, what anime? Because I don't usually watch a whole lot of in-flight stuff. When
was
I'm
it the
back.
thing where you go to the bathroom and then you walk back as you're seeing the back of everyone and their whatever they have on their screen, right?
Yeah. So this was in-flight entertainment. Yeah. This is not just people downloading and watching off their phones.
Oh, really? It was on their screen.
Yeah.
Holy shit!
It was actually part of the Thai Airways in-flight entertainment
service.
That's
fucking crazy.
Yeah. So there were people watching Transformers. There were people watching Thai movies, Indian movies. It's a mixture of different genres and different countries and stuff, right? But whenever there was anything anime related, half the plane that was watching anime was watching Natsume Book of Friends season 7.
So how did that process sink into you? You started seeing all of these different footages of the same thing, and then you're like, what?
For me, it was more like, wow, all these fucking weebs on this plane, dude. Wow, holy shit.
All coming back to Hong Kong, right?
And I'm just sitting there I'm actually the one that's doing a podcast right now, and I'm not watching anything. Props to you guys. Just to sort of also give a bit of a background in terms of how the Natsume Book of Friends franchise have been rolling out. So, it was also a 6-year wait. From the movie that came out back in 2018, along with all the other preceding seasons. So season 6 was 2017, season 5 was 2016, so on and so on. So they had like a pretty steady, like 1 to 2 year release wait in between each property, whether it was a season or a movie. And all of them have been doing really, really well. So the movie was an 8.42, the season 6 was a 8.61, season 5 was an 8.56, and so on and so on. You get the picture, right? So its current score right now of an 8.58 is very high, but also very in line with how Natsume has performed over the past decade.
Yeah. And I will be very clear. I have been giving Natsume Book of Friends like an 8.5, like basically an 8 though, throughout its entire existence, maybe except for the earlier seasons where I gave it maybe a bit of a 9. I don't know because I have to span like 6 seasons, and it's like, the Community, like 6
actually,
seasons.
so I got it wrong. It wasn't 10 years, actually. Season 1, the original Natsume Book of Friends, when it released, was back in 2008.
Okay,
So
there
it's
you
been
go.
16 years.
So there you go. This is going to be a really lame review, but if you like Natsume, it's more Natsume. I don't know what else to tell you. It is Natsume and Nyako-sensei on his regular escapades. The thing I have to say, though, which could be a bit of an annoyance for long-running Natsume Book of Friends fans is, Will, how, like, due to a long hiatus, there's a portion of the first season, the first episode, where they kind of go, hey, so my name is Natsume. You might, these are all of, like, the gang. Oh, he's talking about getting his name back. So there was this book, that my grandma has, and I have to, like, give them all their names back. It's like the retreading of the premise.
They need to, though, right?
I understand that, but if you are aware of the premise, you might be like, oh, okay, basically half of the first episode is a no-brainer, like you can skip, or it's just good to have it back. So
what I would say with that, though, is especially, like, I understand that they want to sort of preamble and sort of, refresh everybody's memories, because yes, it has been 6 years. But if you were like a hardcore Natsume Book of Friends fan, especially if you've watched the preceding 6 seasons along with the movie, I feel like
which I have.
Yeah, I feel like despite not having seen anything new in the past 6 years, a lot of the stuff that happened before would still feel relatively fresh. So I'm not entirely sure who this preamble is for. Because if you're a new fan, you wouldn't be watching season 7 right off the bat.
Or
right?
maybe you would watch the first episode, then go all the way back,
Which is
guess.
kind of a weird thing to do.
Yeah,
right?
But guess what? They do that again. Because they do that almost every season, and every movie, they start like the first 15 minutes being like, guys, remember this? Who am I? Here are these characters. What's up? Anyways.
Oh, actually, just to sort of give you that, they didn't do that for Gunga Online.
They
just straight away, it's Battlefield, little pink girl with her little P90.
Like, know what's up, right?
Being shot at.
Okay.
Like, straight away. It's like, that's you just like, it's just Gunga Online. You know what to expect.
You never left, right?
Yeah, exactly. They literally say, like, you are back in the field, and it's like, oh, I'm going to die. No, you didn't die in the last season, so you'll be fine now.
Now, I had a conversation about this particular, like, 15 minutes reintroduction thing with a friend.
It was 15 minutes. Half the episode, more than half the episode, was just reminding people what happened.
Well, no. It is,
or like reintroducing the cast.
Yeah, it's like the first episode is like a very short, adventure, right? As they always are, very slice of life, very Iyashike, right? But then it just so happens, coincidentally, that all of these characters come back and show their faces almost as if it's like, remember this person, remember this person, remember this person. They literally show all of the characters. They show the grandma. They show everything when it's very much or like blatant, like, hey, remember all these characters. Remember the premise of Natsume Book of Friends, and all wrapped up in a very short kind of adventure, I guess. Oh, do you remember that Nyako-sensei can actually turn into a big dragon? Oh, that happens because you don't want to forget that. And I'm just like, I said to my friend, like, they always do that. Like, why do they have to spend time doing that? And then my friend said this thing that really blew my mind. He says, bro, that's Natsume Book of Friends. Just chill the fuck out, man, and enjoy it. And it blew my fucking mind because that's the whole point.
But I would also give like a counter to that, and of course, like, I'm not a Natsume Book of Friends fan. Not to say that like I don't like it. It's just I never got into it in the first place, right? Maybe one day, when we got to watch them all, it might be something that I pick up, right? But
it would be the most boring thing. I'll be honest.
It would be really hard for me to actually say anything constructive, right?
Yeah.
But Fruits Basket. Right, massive cast of characters, right? All the zodiac animals, along with like the subsidiary animals and characters. What they do with their 3 seasons, right, all the way from the first season to the final season, is they introduce story arcs that revolve around a certain set of characters, whether it is the rat, the ox, the tiger, the tiger, the monkey, and whatnot, and then of course the main character. But what they do is that they kind of use those specific episodes to really go deep into who this character is, what they're doing there, why they're so fucked up. Spoiler alert, they're all fucked up. So it's not necessarily like a sort of recap, oh, that's that character, that's that character. They kind of incrementally introduce each character as the season goes by. Whereas I feel like, from what you're describing, it seems that everything is just like on full display. The whole cast is there, but as every season begins, you kind of have to remind everybody, that's person A, person B, person C, and now we start the show.
Yeah. And like, oh, remember this character that can do this thing? Oh, this character is the president. And they just have a conversation about the work as a student council president. Oh, this is, it's not bad, actually. But it's just kind of like, okay, like, let's, like, whatever. But
you're also trying to rush it in the Yashike, right?
Yeah. I want to rush. And then the second episode starts. Then it's awesome. Then it's about Natsume trying to make a flower bed. And then yokai shows up. And then you're just back into it again. Then you're just back in the Zen-like Stardew Valley vibe of, hey, we're all friends here. Let's all drink some sake. I mean,
it's legitimately half of the title, right?
Exactly. And again, at the end of the day, it's really good. It's what you expect. It hasn't changed. And if you like Natsume Book of Friends, no brainer. If you're new, what are you doing here? Go back to season 1 and try your best to get all the way back here later.
Would you say that it's like as an encapsulation of the whole series, it's a more light-hearted, friend-focused version of Mushishi?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And
because Mushishi in a way is also Yashike.
Like, yeah, like how would you... I cannot really give a very good review of Natsume Book of Friends or Mushishi because it's such a vibe, right?
But you also have to have people who understand the vibe in the first place to watch Yashike. Like, if you just talk to like the run of the mill, everyday average kind of anime fan who watches a lot of the heavy hitters, a lot of like the shonens, some romance and whatnot, having to explain to them what the appeal of Yashike is kind of tough because it's like a whole lot of nothing happens, but that's what's interesting about it.
And that's what's good, but it's also boring by design, but in a good way. And also, duh, it's the fucking 7th season of this. What do you expect that's different? It's not like My Hero Academia where there's hype and where there is crazy plot twists and whatnot, or Naruto with crazy battle scenes. This is just a bunch of friends, a bunch of yokai, a bunch of high school students just chilling.
Just to understand as well, the manga is still ongoing. Right?
Kinda, yeah.
21 years, right? It debuted in 2003. I gotta be honest, like, how many of these supernatural slice-of-life stories can you really do after 21 years?
I don't know. Ask the mangaka, because there's 31 volumes, and the 31st volume came out September 5th of this year. So I have no idea, man.
Yeah.
That being said, it's a really good ride.
Yeah. Is it good enough for people to start all the way from the beginning, season 1, and then watch up till current?
That's like asking someone, "Hey, One Piece is really dope. You should start from episode 1."
Yeah, but the difference there is that 1,000 episodes, right?
True. I mean, yes, but the concept is the same.
Yeah.
I think if you don't like Yashike, there's no point.
Yeah.
If you like something that is on, makes you feel good, a good time, and actually one of the OGs of Yashike based on how old this series is. This is the same shit, different day in the best possible way. You're going to hear that all the time with these sequels. So that's how I feel. But that being said, let's talk about another show that came out of nowhere, at least from a TV anime perspective. Probably from movies and video games. You have seen it recently. We're talking about Dragon Ball Daima. I am not really going to go into the whole spiel about who made it, other than it is made by Akira Toriyama, rest in peace, and produced by Toei Animation, premiered on October 11th, with a MAL score of 8.10, ranked 508, popularity 2840. I don't really know what to use as a source, so I just use Dragon Ball, the manga, which is like really popular and highly ranked, with a score of 8.43. All right. With the exception of like the Broly movies and everything, actually, before all that, Will, what is your understanding of Dragon Ball?
That it is one of the most hardcore and beloved anime series of all time, and regardless of creed, race, gender, sexuality, generation, I don't think you can talk about anime without talking about Dragon Ball.
Absolutely. And from your personal experience, what was like the last Dragon Ball thing that you consumed?
GT.
Okay.
All the way back to GT. I watched a little bit of like Dragon Ball Z, GT, Dragon Ball itself.
What was GT?
GT, I think that one came out after Dragon Ball Z. So there's like overall like 6 installments across the whole Dragon Ball media franchise. So you had Dragon Ball Z. That was from so Dragon Ball, the original, was before my time. That was actually right where you were born, right? Because it came out 1986 and ran until 1989. Dragon Ball Z was 89 to 96. GT was a lot shorter. It just came out like for 1 year, from 96 to 97. So those were the last. That was the last thing I watched. Because then when I started getting into anime, I didn't watch Dragon Ball Z, Kai, I didn't watch Super Dragon Ball Heroes and whatnot. And then now you got Dragon Ball Daima. But you couldn't go anywhere without talking about or hearing about Dragon Ball.
Yeah.
It was massive. Like, you put aside the whole big 3 thing, I think that the history and the acclaim that Dragon Ball has, controversial opinion, I personally think supersedes even One Piece.
Yeah, I think so. And it just so happens, guys, that as of recording, there has been a new Dragon Ball game that came out October 11th, which was a week ago from as of recording, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. And this installment, Dragon Ball Daima, is the second and last to have been written by franchise creator Toriyama Sensei. So it's kind of a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Now, what is Dragon Ball Daima about? As someone that had to enlist the help of a Dragon Ball expert, a friend of mine who has been following Dragon Ball, it essentially takes place after Dragon Ball Z. At least that's what, according to my friend, says. It might not be accurate. I'm going off of my friend's opinion. I could be wrong because I haven't watched all the Broly arcs, even though I played the video game Dragon Ball FighterZ, so I know a little bit about all these crazy characters. But I have to say, it looks fucking phenomenal. It looks... Because you have to understand, when I watched Dragon Ball back in the day, it has the old school feel, right?
The 4:3 aspect ratio.
Yep. So
the graininess as well.
So yes, I am extremely late to the party when it comes to the modern look of Dragon Ball.
I mean, have you finished the Cell games?
I watched all of those.
Oh, wait, you finished it?
What,
Dude, the Cell games
the Cell saga?
It's still ongoing, dude. It never ends.
I don't know.
No,
I mean, isn't there the Frieza arc and all
for
that?
For me, though, it's because every summer, whenever I went back to Canada to watch YTV, which is when that was the channel in Canada.
Okay.
It's a joke. And
sorry.
Every time I watched anything on the anime block and it was Dragon Ball, it was still the fucking Cell games.
Okay, so that's why I was really confused. Okay, I see. So you have to understand that I am kind of a cursory Dragon Ball fan, and as much as I love and appreciate Dragon Ball as a historical aspect of anime, I've just never really gone into it. So I came in being should I watch it or not? The MAL score was really high. I asked my friend, and he goes, try to watch it, and I did. And all I can say is that it is you never left. Now, the first episode is very odd because Goku is the main character in this, and Goku doesn't really play a lot of a big role in the first episode at all. In fact, the Matrix, the architect, the room with all of the screens.
Yeah.
So a lot of the first episode takes place in kind of that room, and the architect is these two demons. And pretty much all of the first episode is like almost like recollecting and them debating. Then at the very end of the first episode, you really get the premise of the anime, which I'm gonna spoil because it's not really a spoiler. If you know anything about Dragon Ball, what happens when you have a Dragon Ball? This is not a trick question. This is literally like, when you have a Dragon Ball, what's so good about it?
Super Saiyan.
What happens if you have 7 of them?
Super Saiyan.
Wait, really? You don't know?
No, the dragon comes up, right?
Yes, and then they grant you a wish, right?
Yeah.
So the wish that was granted was, I want all of the main characters to turn into babies. And that's the end of the first episode. And that is the premise of Dragon Ball Daima.
Just reset the world, basically?
Literally, I have no idea. I have no idea if it's like it's supposed to be like the next adventure, but everyone is now childlike.
That is actually very meta, because I was actually looking into the voice cast. Goku is still done by the same voice actress back from 1986. It is still Masako Nozawa.
Yeah, so it's kind of...
She's 87 years old now. Holy fuck.
And I feel bad because, I don't feel bad. It feels like we're nostalgic because at the same time, there's also the voice actress for Doraemon that passed away. So rest in peace. So it's kind of like this revival of Dragon Ball. Again, excluding all of the Broly movies and all that stuff, right? So all I can say is that it's back. It's been a long time, like 6-7 years or whatever. And it looks really good. Now, does that mean I will stay and watch it? I don't know. But it is interesting to see everyone coming back and reliving Dragon Ball as I used to know it.
Yeah, dude, like, fan associations and biases aside, right? Like, you gotta put respect on the whole Dragon Ball franchise because of the fact that it ran way longer than One Piece. And yes, of course, One Piece is always going to be the latest and greatest for however long it will run. But Dragon Ball has been there since before even you were born. I'm not calling you out for being old. It's just that's just a fact, right? And the fact that to this day, I think that at least in Hong Kong, right? There are two pillars of anime: Slam Dunk, Dragon Ball.
Yeah,
and you can never ever tell an Asian fan that those two are lesser than One Piece.
Yeah. So to go back to Dragon Ball Z, which I think is the thing that everyone remembers, this takes place between Dragon Ball Z.
And Initial D2.
Yes. Yeah, that too. MF Ghost, congratulations. Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super, this takes place in between that. So it's not a sequel to the whole lore. It is the sequel to Dragon Ball Z. I want to be very clear to those who are not acquainted with the lore.
But it's also not super confusing either, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But it is like a fun side adventure, I guess, is how I interpret it to be. I could be wrong, but it looks fucking fantastic. When you see Goku do a Kamehameha as like a shtick, and it is in beautiful 60 frames per second, 16:10 ratio and everything, it looks really nice. And I think it's gotten hype because of the video game and everything. So if you like Dragon Ball, this is a no-brainer. If you don't like Dragon Ball, but you've watched it before like me, it's not too much to ask to check it out and see if you vibe with it or not. It combines the light-hearted comedy that you realize from back then, and probably some of the action scenes, I presume, because they haven't shown a lot of action yet. But everything is modernized and it looks crisp and it's in full HD for everyone to see. So it's a no-brainer that it is one of the best of the season, at least according to my anime list.
All right, Jason, you're dead.
Okay, shit.
But then you're back to life.
Okay.
And now, for some reason, you also have a really strong appraisal skill. What are you going to do for Season 2?
I'm going to pretend to be an aristocrat.
Yep.
And we are now going to talk about, as a reincarnated aristocrat, I will use my appraisal skill to rise in the world Season 2.
I cringed a little bit doing that as an introduction, but this is how these reincarnation light novel isekai adaptations always turn out. The fucking titles are as clear as day what the anime is going to be about.
Isn't Slime 300 I've I'm really tired, so I've decided to reincarnate and kill slimes until I'm level 300 or something.
Yeah, I mean, I died, and all of a sudden I'm a vending machine. So now I live a life as a vending machine.
And wander the dungeon. Yeah. I mean, hey, if there's a charm to it.
Yeah, but you did watch season 1.
Yeah, and I also read all of the manga up to like volume 12.
But not the light novel, right?
No, not the light novel. So the light novel is ongoing based on the series of the same name by Jimmy, who did the art, and Mirajin, who did the story. Published in English by Kodansha. Same thing with the English manga adaptation. Premiered September 29th. Produced by Studio Mother, which is kind of odd if you remember Studio Mother's pedigree. The first season has 7.14 MAL score. The source of the light novel is 6.76, which is very, mid, I guess.
What's also really crazy as well is that the light novel only came out in 2020.
Yeah.
Which is a very short run for a light novel to now have 2 seasons of an anime. I mean, it's probably the fact that it might just be way more popular in Japan than it is elsewhere.
Yeah, it could be. But that being said, the second season has 7.44 on my anime list. Again, also done by Studio Mother. Now, the thing that I have to mention about Studio Mother is that it doesn't have a good rap in general.
They only have 8 productions under their name.
True.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay. The main things they've done so far are Appraisal, life, Reincarnated,
There's more than a lover.
More than a married couple, but not lovers. That one actually did quite well, 7.58.
Yes. So they have been doing fine. But Studio Mother, I have to say season 2 is pretty much the same as season 1 in terms of quality. Now, why is there an increase in score? Unsurprisingly, it's because of the arc. The arc now, because you know how it goes, Will, with a lot of these animes. It's like, you need to spend the first season to set everything up.
Well, the way it is, right? The first poster for the first season is just all the characters and side characters standing in a field.
Yes.
Right? The second poster is all the characters now standing up, and there's a horse.
And fighting.
So obviously...
like battle stances.
The ante is upped.
Yes. And you are not wrong, because guess what? There is a war. And that is basically what season 2 is about. I know in the manga I've read way past it, so I know what's up. And it looks to be pretty good. And I think the thing that holds it up is the storyline and the characters, not really the animation quality, but the animation quality is just fine. So, again, if you like Aristocrat, similarly how we say that this season is full of sequels, if you like season 1, no-brainer watch season 2. If you're interested, start by season 1. If you're not, move on. Nothing else to see here.
Now we talked about Dragon Ball before. We're going to talk about another revival series, Ranma Half. So, based on the completed manga series of the same name by Rumiko Takahashi, published in English by Viz Media from 1993 through to 2006, one of the longest running manga series under the Viz title. The anime, the OG anime was done by Studio Dean. Lo and behold, they got a massive upgrade in being produced by Studio Mappa. So, the original anime had a raw score of 7.76, popularity 1,121. Popularity 961. The current anime right now, not that much higher, but 7.92, getting close to an 8. Popularity 3002. So of course, you know how these numbers add up in terms of popularity and membership and whatnot. I think everything is actually very much like across the board the same, right? Their OG source in terms of like the anime and the manga 7.98, popularity 320. Ranma Half is one of those kinds of. Would you say it's a bit of like a auxiliary historical classic in that? You obviously have like your heavy hitters, at least in Asia, of like your Initial D's, of like your One Pieces, of Naruto's, of your I guess what else was there? Yu Yu Hakusho as well.
Yes.
Rurouni Kenshin. Ranma Half.
Yurusei Yatsura as well.
Yurusei Yatsura as well. Yes.
David Productions did the modern. Yeah.
But Ranma Half was for me never really something I did watch. It's just that everybody knew about the hot cold gender change thing.
Yeah. I am of the same ilk because I always consider Ranma half as this thing that always existed back then that I actually never really knew much about.
Before there were memes, this was the meme.
Yeah, I would watch like Yu Yu Hakusho. I would watch Dragon Ball. I would watch even
Conan?
I would less of Yatsura. I would watch Conan. So Kendaichi as well because I grew up from Conan. I guess that was the upgrade in quotes, right?
Where people die.
And also ecchi stuff. But that being said, Ranma half was this thing that I always knew existed that was always popular, but I wasn't really into checking it out because it was a little bit of like, well, it's about China a bit in the 1980s, but in Japan. And I'm just like, I'm more interested in the more wacky stuff that anime has to offer. So I just thought, as a Chinese person, like, it's not that interesting. That being said, though, I forgot to mention for the beginning of this series, beginning of this episode, is that if you live in Hong Kong, Netflix Hong Kong has been pulling all the stops.
Ranma half is on there. Orb is on there.
Dandadan is on there.
Is Blue Box on there?
Yes. Natsume is on there. What is it? Shangri-La Season 2 is on there. Ranma half is on there.
Plus a lot of the stuff that came out for summer.
Yep. Forbidden Deductions is on there. Blue Lock is on there. And
so you can imagine this is just the Hong Kong catalog.
Yeah.
Imagine how stacked the U.S. catalog is, right?
So if you live in, I mean, I don't know how the licensing works because probably Crunchyroll took a lot of that for the U.S. audience or the Western audience. But if you live in Hong Kong, pretty much all you need this season is Netflix for all of the good shows. Even ReZero, I think, is on there. So
Bleach is on there for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like a no-brainer, bro. Oh, actually, I don't know if Bleach is on. Actually, yes, it is. It is. It's just not the old stuff. So why is Ranma half worth your attention? First of all, it is done by Studio Mappa.
So the upgrading visual is I mean, of course, the fact that the original came out many, many years ago, right?
Yeah. And I have to admit, Will, have you seen the first episode?
No, I watched like bits of it.
Okay.
So aesthetically, the character like designs are 100% the same.
Yes.
In terms of like the visual quality of it's night and day, but it's not even a fair comparison.
Yeah. I have to say, watching, I think 2 episodes are out, and I think the 3rd episode is out around this time, so we couldn't watch it in time. It looks fucking fantastic. It really has what I would call the most ideal modernization.
Yeah.
Because for those who are unaware, Ranma half takes place in the 1980s in Japan. It is about a group of a family with 3 daughters, and they own a dojo. And then all of a sudden, one of them needs to get married to this random Chinese guy who is a good friend of the dojo's the father,
the master of the dojo.
Yes, who runs the dojo. So all of a sudden, this new random person and his father shows up, but they have this weird, shtick, weird quirk where water is involved that change their gender or changes their form, and hilarity ensues.
I mean, it fits within like the magical sex shift genre theme, right?
Yeah, and I have to admit, if this is what Ranma half is about, it is really good because Studio Mappa not only gave it like a very nice, like the toning, like the little dots with the black and the white toning that in manga, they did it a lot here.
You mean like cell shading?
Yeah, cell shading. They do it a lot here to kind of give it like an old school modernized feel, if that makes sense. In certain areas, they have the thing of the old school anime where there's always music playing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then they do I don't know if it's a racist thing. I don't think it is, but they do that appropriation thing of when the characters first show up, they play Chinese-oriented music. So it's up to you whether you feel that is extra offensive or whether you feel that that's just the way it is.
Stereotypes,
and they retain that, and it is a very well produced show because when they show like the choreography, they don't just do the thing in anime where it's just like a cloud of smoke, or they just do the quick like zoom 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 zoom. They actually show the choreography, and it's really well done.
Yeah. So this is where I'm kind of on the fence in terms of how to go forward with Ranma half, because much like how Urusei Yatsura 2 years ago came up with like the revitalized new version of it, right?
By David Productions, yeah.
So it was like, again, similar to how the current Urusei Yatsura is 30 to 40 years in between each one, right? Urusei Yatsura first debuted in 1981, and then the new one came out in 2022.
Yep.
Much like with Ranma half, 1989, the new one came out just this past weekend. So what you were mentioning in terms of giving it that digital upscale, I think it makes sense, right? They're producing it now.
But I think it's more than that.
Well, explain why.
Because they modernized the look. I mean, it's not just like they took the old school look, retouched it a bit, and then up-resed it, and then aspect ratioed it. They actually made it such that the jokes almost retain the ethos, the mythos of the old school thing, but they modernize it. So, for example,
well, I mean, that's the part of adding that contemporary touch. Right?
So, for example, like nowadays, LGBT and all that stuff has been very much prominent in a lot of things, and obviously has been way more accepted. And I would consider Ranma half the gender sex change thing as like their shtick, right? Here they play it up more, and then being like, well, is he in love with a guy or a girl? And then they modernize it such that I feel like if you were to watch the old school anime, you might feel a little bit, this might be a bit.
But that's the thing, though, right?
Like,
it was released at that time for that audience.
Yes.
So therefore, that is going to be the difference. You like, of course, any anime that was from the 1980s that came out at that time is going to be revolutionary. Much like if you would do the same thing 40 years later, and you're going to give it a bit of a retouch, maybe change the jokes so that it fits more with today's times, and give it that appeal where it's going to be more suited for a modern audience. I think that's par for the course, but that's not to say that like that's how it should be done and should always be done. It's really easy to fuck things up if you were to try and bring something from the past into the present. I mean, like, look what Disney's doing with all their modernizations of, like, The Lion King, of
Star Wars and all that.
Beauty and the Beast and all that. They're always going to try and take old... I mean, Aladdin. Aladdin was awful, right? I thought Lion King was okay, just from the voice acting, but in general, it was
CGI.
Well, no,
lions, right?
It was not CGI. It was live animals, but with CGI touches and whatnot.
It's like Babe when they talk, right?
Because let's be real, right? Warthogs don't talk like that.
Yeah.
So, I think it will always be the lazy assumption that it's par for the course to up-res, upscale, and also modernize jokes and like visual appeal. But to do it well is another thing.
And I think, in my opinion, Ranma half does it very, very well.
Yep.
And it only gives me hope that it would continue on just like Yatsura did with David Productions.
Funny enough, both of them were done by Studio Dean.
Yeah.
Actually, well, no, not like fully, like, because Urusei Yatsura was a co-production between Dean and Pierrot. But Dean had a hand
Dean
in both
back
of them.
in the day was really crazy good.
So here's a crazy prediction.
Yeah.
So now that we're seeing all these old Studio Dean productions getting recontemporized for today's audience, do you foresee that there's going to be a new modern version of original Fate Stay Night?
No.
Because it's
such a quick response.
It's too far gone, right?
Yeah,
like, the fact that you already have so many. You have Ataraxia. You have Ataraxia is not done yet. But you have like Fate Strange Fake coming up. You have like the Grand Order stuff. You've got Hollow. You've got all the other things.
Let me put it this way: if we go back to that conversation of the Type Moon properties to remake, I would focus more on Tsukihime first before I even think about Studio Dean's Fate Stay Night. If it was my personal take, especially because
bring back Garden of Sinners.
Yeah, but that's a ballsy move in my opinion, because Garden of Sinners is really dark and really good. But
and also, like, if you were to try and do it again, you probably fuck up.
Yeah,
it was a masterpiece for when it came out, and it's not something that you want to try and reinvent.
Also, I still think it holds up to modern technology and modern looks too. So
but that also comes down to what I was saying, that like there really is like a sort of plateau in terms of how far you can take art style on screen, right? Until you start actually having new technologies to showcase how things are taken in visually. I don't think that you can really go that much cleaner. Because in the end, a computer's a computer, a pencil's a pencil. How much more innovative and more creative can you really be?
Yeah.
Right?
And I would say that for Ranma Half's purpose, the art style that I would see of the original work has been retained, and there's very little CGI. It's almost all hand-drawn, and it's very, very crisp, very clean, and it is a really good adaptation, if not almost a must-see if you're ever into Ranma Half or curious about it. It is definitely one of those shows that I think is worth your attention. Just like how Yutsura 2024 is worthy of your attention if you're into checking that out too.
Yeah, I think in the end it just comes down to whether you want a fresh take on a very, very old classic. That's mainly like what is the deciding factor for people who want to watch new anime this season, right?
Or if you've heard of Ranma Half back then, but you never checked it out, and then here's a remake of it now.
Yeah.
But
you're always going to get that, right? I mean, we had that with the Full Alchemist. We had that with Hunter x Hunter. There's always going to be new iterations of old classics for people that maybe missed it the first time round.
Yes, and I think this is that.
I mean, shit, dude. You have the 20th anniversary of Naruto coming up, and they're doing like a 4-episode special sometime next year.
Yeah.
Or to commemorate it,
I don't know what that's about, but we'll probably check it out, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So that is how I feel about Ranma Half. How are we doing on time, Will?
I think it's a good time to maybe put the brakes on and come back after the break, because this is when we start going into like the proper
new shows.
Right?
Yeah.
So, we'll get back to you in just a minute. We are back with the continuation of the Fall 2024 seasonal review on the Good Anime Palette podcast. We've gone over the sequels, we've gone over the remakes. Now we're going to go into actual new shows that premiered this season. Jason's still here, I'm still here. Let's kick things off. Which seasonal do you want to talk about first? I think that there's one that's been long awaited and is probably a good time to go into. We got to talk about Spiral, man. We got to talk about Uzumaki.
Okay.
So I don't really think we need to go into much stats because y'all know this is Junji Ito's baby. Y'all already know that year after year after year, when it gets closer and closer and closer to Halloween, we're awaiting for Uzumaki to come out, only to then be told that production got delayed. We're actually going to push it back to the next year, and then finally for fall 2024, we got Uzumaki on screen. So if you've been watching on Toonami, you've been watching on Adult Swim, you've been watching on Hulu, you've been watching on
Max,
a lot of the American streaming services. So it is a little bit tough to be able to watch it, but if you've got some VPNs and you also have some subscriptions, it shouldn't be too hard for you to get it.
So the thing about Uzumaki that, despite us not going to talk about a lot of the stats or the mouse score, you have to know several things. The first thing is there's only 4 episodes. So that's an important thing to sort of say.
Yeah, by the time this episode comes out, all 4 episodes will be out.
Correct. So, that being said, you should also know that this is one of Junji Ito's most famous work of all time. And Will and I love it to bits. I gave it a 10 out of 10. I think Will probably gave it a 10 out of 10 as well, or a 9 out of 10.
What would you say are like top 3 for Junji Ito?
Oh, that's easy.
Gyo,
Tomie, Gyo, and Uzumaki.
Yeah.
I would say Uzumaki is first, Tomie is second, Gyo is third.
But in terms of like iconic characters, you can't look past Tomie. Like anytime it's a Halloween, there's a Tomie somewhere.
I just like Uzumaki as a...
of course, it's classic.
Yeah.
It's hard to look past it.
And obviously, the whole world agrees because Uzumaki is chosen by the American Library Association as one of the top 10 greatest graphic novels for teens in 2009.
Yeah.
I just mentioned that just to give you how big of a deal this is.
We don't really need to go into like the synopsis of it just because I think anybody that's listening to this right now has already read the manga.
Yeah, and if you haven't, you also shouldn't be spoiled, I think.
Yeah.
That being said, though,
hair, snails, wells,
spirals. Yeah. That's it. That's all you need to know.
So, we've been waiting a very, very long time for Uzumaki.
3 years of delays?
When we first started doing this podcast back in 2021, there was already murmurs and news releases of Uzumaki coming out. So that tells you how long we've been waiting. The fact that like we started this podcast, and the fact that now we're in season 8, and we only just got the release of Uzumaki. Everybody's been like getting blue balls. So it's good that it's finally come out. But there was also a lot of, I guess, sort of wariness that with how a lot of the Junji Ito stuff had been adapted. I think there was like a series, like a chronicle of like short stories that came out a couple seasons ago, and it wasn't very well received. So people are always going to be kind of standoffish in terms of how well this adaptation is, because sometimes like you just can't fuck with art. Sometimes there just are certain things that you just should not do. But Uzumaki, it was just something that was just too big to leave alone. And the fact that it was super popular, especially in the U.S., it had to come out. It makes sense why it's on Adult Swim, right?
Well, it was announced, the 4-episode anime was announced in 2019's Crunchyroll Expo, and it's only out now.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I think COVID definitely played a factor in it.
Absolutely.
Right? But, COVID aside, it's finally out. We don't need to talk about the stats in terms of like the original source, because it's good. Don't worry about it. If you haven't read it yet, what are you doing? Go and read it.
Now, what I will give you the mouse stats is the current mouse score, because I think that's very important.
Before that, let's talk about how the first episode rolled out.
Sure.
So, in terms of all the previews we had seen, especially like the trailer that people have been watching recently, it's the same trailer as it was that came out like a year or two ago. So nothing's really changed there. It's still like an Etch-a-Sketch kind of appeal. It's still black and white. So basically how you remembered the manga looking like, it's not that far off.
Which is a good thing, by the way.
It's a very good thing. It means that they are paying homage to how it was originally presented. Nothing in terms of like the visual appeal is lost. So that's the good thing. The main thing that people will worry about is in terms of the sound, how the music would play, how the voice acting would play out. And I am glad to say that at least in the first episode, really done well. I really liked how we finally got a not live action, an in-motion version of Uzumaki, because as terrifying as the manga was, I think that the first episode of this series is done really, really well. So I'm glad that if people had just started getting into it and watching it, you would have been like redeemed. The waiting time, the how scared you were in terms of how it's going to look, all those little bit of like
trepidation.
I'd say trepidations, all the horror that might come in terms of how bad or how good it's going to be.
Yeah, not of the horror genre of Junji Ito's Uzumaki.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. So you would expect that you're going to get some good stats on Mal, and it did. So I think when it first came out, 7.9, there was a massive bump in pushing it into the 8 territory.
Yep. It was like an 8.19 at one point.
206,000 members on my anime list. But this is where things kind of go south for the series, because now it's sitting at a 6.93, which is a far cry from what it was just a week ago.
Yeah, it's almost like a 1.2 points difference from where it was.
So I only watched episode 1, but you continued on. So where did it all fall apart?
So I watched the episode that I guess everyone now is sort of saying is a big drop, which is episode 2. I heard from others, or at least judging by reviews and online, speculation, episode 3 is better than episode 2.
But you feel the damage is already done.
But damage is already done, and it's not as good as episode 1. Now, there is a lot that I have to mention here, because it is extremely important now that I've realized sort of where the possible issues lie. As Will mentioned, COVID-19 undoubtedly had an effect. How much? How serious? Well, it got delayed because of COVID-19. They even said it. Now, the other thing I also have to mention is the director, who is Hiroshi Nagahama, you might have heard that name being reiterated, is not credited for the 3rd episode. That is kind of worrying. Also in the 2nd episode as well. So the thing that I also want to mention, okay, hold on. Let me get this out first. So first of all, Nagayama, the director for episode 1, which is the one that everyone, including myself, liked. Will, what do you think of the first episode?
Great. Yeah. I really, really liked it.
Well,
there was nothing to say that it was a disservice to the original source. I think that they paid perfect homage to the classic that is Uzumaki.
Unfortunately, for episode 2, Nagayama was not credited as a director as of episode 2. He was replaced by a person named Yuji Moriyama. I'm not super familiar with this person, but this is different than, the episode director role, which I think is what his or her original roles was. And from episode 2 onwards, Nagayama's name isn't even on the project outside of minor storyboards or 3D character design credits. And this is the part where it gets even crazier, because now Studio Drive is now credited on the storyboards for the anime's first episode, but the actual credits for that episode shows Fugaku Incorporated, which is the one that is supposed to be in charge of it. Now, why is that important? Because Nagayama is credited as the storyboard artist, anime director, and key animation on episode 1. And even though he's still credited with the storyboard for episode 2, everything else is different and outsourced, primarily to a studio called Phoenix Animation Holdings, which is a Chinese studio, to my knowledge. Now, again, not throwing shade at outsourcing, because sometimes push comes to shove. But it is very, very evident the dip from episode 1 to 2. And it's important to sort of emphasize Nagayama's involvement, right? Because it's kind of like, how season 1 of One Punch Man was like the director being the main driving force in kind of overseeing everything, or how in Psycho-Pass the creator of the original IP, because it's an anime original, was helming it and everything was going good, and then when he gets off for season 2, everything kind of goes a little bit haywire. And you can definitely see that from episode 1 to episode 2. Now, is it a massive difference in production? It is noticeable, but I don't think it is that bad. I think, obviously, the internet really just exaggerates everything. Mm-hmm. But I will say it does significantly detract from episode 1 in a major way. And it is very unfortunate. Now, does that mean it's a bad adaptation? I don't think so. I've yet to finish the other 2 episodes.
I think the problem with Uzumaki is that when you have such a delayed release time, especially when you announce your project 5 years ago, and the manga itself coming out even longer than that the weight of expectation is always going to linger, no matter what. It doesn't matter who's directing it, who's producing it, and also like how many people are waiting to watch it. There's always going to be a group of people that are like going to be super hardcore and say, don't fuck this up.
Yeah.
And I think that's where like the weight of criticism comes from, where there might be certain aspects, whether it's visual, whether it's story, whether it's direction, whether it's voice acting, if anything does not align with your expectation, which is kind of crazy, because what can you really expect from a live action when you had no other things to compare it to, right?
Yeah.
So it is unfair, but at the same time, you also can't discount that you are going to have hardcore fans that feel maybe a bit betrayed in terms of how the drop-off from episode 1 to episode 2 is.
And unfortunately, right, Uzumaki is as hardcore as you can get in terms of the zeitgeist and how much it means to so many people, ourselves included.
I mean, dude, like the fandom for Junji Ito alone is like fucking insane. So it's a core like fan base that you don't want to piss off.
And how many good adaptations have we had of Junji Ito's works? I would say barely.
None.
I would say Gale maybe a little bit.
Or what about live action Uzumaki?
Yeah, that's different, right?
Yeah.
I watched the Uzumaki live action movie like from like the early 2000s or whatever, and that was great. But if we go by anime standards, like how many Junji Ito's, like isn't there like an anthology?
Yep.
Junji Ito
and
thing?
that was awful apparently.
And there's so many bad Junji Ito adaptations, which is really unfortunate due to the fact that Junji Ito is basically the godfather, I think, of Japanese body horror genre. Like, he is the guy. Like, you don't talk about Parasite and not mention Junji Ito in the same breath, right? Obviously, they're not done by the same person, but it's clear that the inspiration going forward is by Junji Ito, right? And unfortunately, to me, Will, the discussion and review that I have for Uzumaki is outshined by the drama and the production problems that has since been revealed with Uzumaki. And at the end of the day, when we look back on Uzumaki's 4-episode run, we probably won't really pay much attention to the drama and the lack of production value or the mess and the chaos that we are all focusing on right now. Is it a bad adaptation with the 2 episodes that I've seen? No. Could it have been better? Absolutely.
So it's really hard to sit here and say, like, don't watch it or do watch it. In the end, if you like Junji Ito, you'll probably give Uzumaki a chance. Now, that's not to say that you give everything a chance, because the last 2 things that came out under the Junji Ito umbrella, which was Junji Ito Collection back in 2018 and Junji Ito Maniac Japanese Tales of the Macabre, those 2...
Oh, I remember that. Oh.
Guess who produced both of those?
Which one?
Studio Dean.
Oh, there you go.
Studio Dean did both of them.
Sorry, Studio Dean, but you kind of...
But it was like, I mean, like when I was on Netflix, and remember, okay, Junji Ito Maniac only came out last year, right? 12 episodes, ONA, but I just did not want to watch it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, oh, it's probably going to be shit. No, it's just the fact that, like, I know how these things get handled. I've seen it. I've been burned many a time. And when you have such a big name like Junji Ito and you then see adaptations, like I remember Junji Ito purely for how his mangas were.
Yeah.
And so therefore when you need to see things in motion, with sound, with color, or maybe without color, but just seeing things move on screen, you can't help but like maintain your biases.
Yeah, and on top of all that, you have to understand that when the first trailer of Uzumaki came out, right?
Man. Oh, God.
It looked freaking crazy good.
Yes.
Because it not only recaptured what the the manga actually looked like, but then it moved in such a way that it was creepy. It was like unsettling. Now, what I will say though is the soundtrack has sustained its level of quality, right? I think it's done by a Western guy. I'm sorry, I need to find your name at some point. But, okay, Colin Stetson. He made the soundtrack. And I have to admit, the soundtrack is fucking crazy. It is really unsettling. It gives, like, Dead Space Silent Hill vibes. Like, it's supposed to do what a horror soundtrack is supposed to do. And it is really, really well done. On top of all of that...
Oh, wow. This guy worked with Arcade Fire, Bon Iver, Bell Orchestra. This guy's
real stacked.
Real deal.
Yeah. And I just feel like the problem is, Will, when I say to you or anybody that... And based off your knowledge of the Junji Ito adaptations, if I were to tell you this is the best Junji Ito adaptation that I've seen, you might think, oh, that's really good. That's the best. But...
It's because of the load of crap that came before it.
Yeah. Like, when I mean by best, if everything is like a 4 out of 10, let's just say, for argument's sake.
And this is come across a 6 out of 10, that's going to be the masterpiece, right?
Yeah, and that's considered the best. But now, a 6 out of 10 compared to a 9 or a 10 out of 10 is not.
So the thing is, I feel like it does come across as a bit harsh to use that as a barometer for how Uzumaki is received. Because, let's be real, if it was up to me to tell people, regardless, again, I come from the perspective of having not watched episode 2, but regardless, I still feel that given the long delay, given the fact that it's still Uzumaki, that you should give it a chance.
I also agree. I think that the huge drop in mouse score, again, it's biased because it's only from a particular subset of people on the internet, and also everyone exaggerates and panics about the production value. It does have a big dip. I will give you that. But I don't think it is as significant enough that it completely eliminates the possibility of people recommending the show. But it is a big gut-wrenching punch because we were looking so forward to it, man.
I mean, to be fair, I'm still hyped about it because I only watched episode 1. But look, despite the drop-off from episode 2 onwards, give it a chance.
Yeah, and I heard episode 3 is better than episode 2, but not as good as episode 1. And who knows how episode 4, which I think as of recording, it's out roundabout now. So, good luck.
Now moving on to, I think we kind of breezed through the next 2. So, Nina the Starry Bride. We talked about this for our last ASAP. It's out now, done by Signal MD. I didn't watch it. I think, Jason, you got a glimpse of it. And this was one of the series during that episode of the ASAP that we were most wary of.
Yeah, and
in terms of how it would be done, how it would be received. I think that our initial criticisms, or at least like us kind of not being so hot on it, have been kind of realized.
Yeah, I think both of us, or at least I definitely said it was a high 6, low 7. And guess what?
It's 6.79.
And it's very unfortunate because
okay. Based on how the manga rolled out, and of course, then that's how the anime will roll out, unless you decide to completely change course and not follow through. The story itself is solid. It's decent.
Yeah.
It's a classic kind of romance,
historical
coming of age kind of thing, where a young girl taken away as an orphan and has to live a false life, but then realizing that this false life itself is based on other false lies and all that, and then trying to find truth, trying to find reason behind their existence and what to do with this newfound knowledge. That's a pretty solid plot. Where do things fall apart? Like
execution.
Granted, like only a couple episodes are out, right? So
I only saw the first episode.
Is it bad voice acting?
Nope.
Is it the quality in terms of like the visuals?
Yes.
Is it the main? Is that the main reason?
Yes.
Okay.
It is. It looks very generic for us. No, as in terms of the animation quality and the gusto that they put into it. For example, I think in the beginning of the end of the first episode is sort of near the end of the first volume where a queen is splashed water, let's just say. Okay? And that is supposed to be a very pivotal moment because the prince that is in question shows a little bit of himself. Nina shows how she acts around people. It's supposed to be like a crescendo moment of all these different factors coming together. And it is technically executed correctly, faithfully adapted, but it's done very mid. And it reminds me of the Fable when we first watched it, but I think it doesn't hold in terms of legs. You know what I mean?
I think it also just comes down to, unfortunately, I don't like doing this where I just point it at the studio, but Signal MD does not have the best track record. The last time they made anything that was above a 7 was Recovery of an MMO Junkie back in 2017. That one was a 7.53. Other than that, everything else is okay. Platinum End 6.03. Kizuna Allele was 5.25. This other one, Mars Red, was a 6.58. They did do this other one, which was a 7.63. Bubble Up Like Soda Pop.
Yeah,
that was
pretty good.
But that was a movie, right? So of course there might have been a little bit more attention, and it was also a co-production with Sublimation. So it's not to say that it's Signal MD, that's why it's not good. But when you look at the prior productions before Nina Starry Bride, it doesn't seem like out of the ordinary that this. I mean, to be fair, right? 6.79 is actually quite high in comparison to a lot of the stuff that came before it. So, and Platinum End is a big franchise,
Death
right?
Note artist, right?
Yeah.
So,
But I mean, you and I watched like the first episode of it, and we were like, "Fuck this, dude! I'm sorry."
Yeah. So again, this is one of those shows where we predicted that it won't do that well, and guess what? It didn't do that well. The manga source is way better.
Stick to the manga.
Stick to the manga.
That's it.
Yeah.
Now, 365 Days to the Wedding. Take it away, Jason.
It is based on the manga of the same name, released by Seven Seas Entertainment. We'll just quickly we won't go over all of the mouse stats, other than to say that the manga has a score of 7.69 and the anime has a score of 7.15 by Ashi Productions. The storyline is pretty cute. It's about a male and a female who works at a travel agency, and they have to send someone to, I think, Alaska or Antarctica because travel agency has to open a branch there or something. And then they were like, well, we both don't want to go there because we're both single, so we don't have a family, so they're probably going to send us there. But let's say we get married. Let's just say that. And then they can't send us there because we are then getting married. And then hijinks ensues because then you have to tell your parents that you're kind of fake marrying. And then everyone is now curious about why you're all of a sudden said that you're a couple and then you're getting married. And surprise, surprise, you kind of both develop feelings for each other. And you're both awkward and antisocial.
Do you think it's just the fact that this sounds like the run-of-the-mill adult workplace-based romance?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But is it good? It's good. I like the manga quite a bit. I read it for a while already. And it's one of those shows. That's it.
But again, like, do you feel like this is another one of those classic it's better as a manga versus an anime kind of situations? Considering
Yes.
that the manga itself is like 0.5 points higher?
Yeah, and I think the reason why is quite simple. When you have manga, words on a page, you can see the inner thoughts of the characters, and generally you can't fit all of that into an anime when you are limited by motion and you can't have like a 5-minute monologue, right? And that's important because the two characters have these monologues, because that's the whole point of the show, is these two characters who are very endearing, but they're super socially awkward. They think in their minds about so many things, like socially awkward people do, and then they end up forgetting acting like regular social behavior, so to speak. But is that a problem? Oh, hey, maybe they're into each other, but they can't express it. I think this show is one of those shows that is like second, third rotation. If you really like that show, that kind of premise, this is a no-brainer. The manga is better, but it is not a deal breaker if you watch the anime.
Now, moving on to the next one, which is something that I watched. You Are Miss Servant, based on ongoing manga series by Shotan, who did both the story and art. There's no official English publication, but it doesn't matter because the anime premiered on October 6th, and it's done by Felix Films. The stats across the manga as well as the original source are very, very similar. The score for the manga 7.3, 7.39 for the anime. So pretty decent numbers, but considering that we've been talking about some sequels that have like scores of 8 and up, and then like the upcoming shows are also going to be pretty heavy hitters, why am I talking about Your Miss Servant?
I was actually going to check this out, but I just didn't get around to it, Will.
So the premise is very straightforward. Okay. Hitoyoshi Yoyoka is a high school student living alone. All of a sudden, doorbell rings, looks outside the peephole. Oh, there's this mysterious girl. What's she doing here? And the first thing she says, I am so-and-so. I am going to be your maid going forward. Boom. The OP plays.
Okay.
And the OP, I will say this right now. It's my favorite OP of this season. And there is another series later on that we're going to talk about that does, for me, have one of the most bombastic OPs. But I really loved the OP for You Are Miss Servant. I don't talk about openings that often, but the music was really good. And it transitions from live action to anime to clay motion to stop-start to marionettes.
What?
It's crazy. It's really fucking good.
So it's like Bocchi the Rock weird?
I mean, I didn't watch Butcher the Rock, but
okay.
There
was claymation, there was live action footage,
I'll show it to you later, but it is exhilarating to watch that 1.5 minutes of the OP. Now, that doesn't necessarily translate into how the rest of the anime goes.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Because it's it's relatively slow paced. Who is this mysterious girl that all of a sudden just shows up at someone's door? Well, this quote unquote maid that walks into the door. Her name is Yuki, and she wants to be someone's maid. So she happens to pick Hitoyoshi's house. However, she can't do shit. She has no household, no cleaning skills, because her actual profession is an assassin. Yes, we're talking about Your Light. So she essentially is just this cold-blooded killer, has amazing skills in terms of hand-to-hand combat, in terms of eliminating somebody that's a target.
By the way, when you say you mean Your Light, as in Your from Spy X Family,
Your Forger.
But
yes.
a more milder, lighter version, right? Yeah.
As in, basically, because she's not trying to she's living a false life, but not as a wife, not as a mother. This person is just trying to be somebody's maid.
Right.
So her whole life has been around living off of killing. Right.
Right.
However, of course, there are going to be some emotions that come up here and there because this is still somewhat of a romance. Romance subtext kind of thing.
So
right?
Why is this person just so freely willing to have this random person take care of him?
Well, I mean, dude, Hideyoshi's just some random kid.
Okay.
Has no idea what's going on. But shenanigans ensues. She saves his life, and therefore he kind of feels indebted to her, and therefore she sticks around as the servant. So this is not necessarily like the most pure run. It's still relatively generic, right? But I thought that there was enough in there in terms of the character dynamics, the plot that carries over in terms of like why this Miss Serpent is going to be an interesting character to follow through this season. But of course, the main reason why I wanted to talk about it was that the OP is fucking crazy, and I really really like it. If you don't care enough about the anime, just watching the opening is enough. That's it. But if there are certain things about the story, about the characters that you feel like would be pretty cool to watch along. I have no problem in terms of recommending it.
So it's a slice of life show.
It's a slice of life. It's a little bit of comedy. It's a little bit of romance. I think like the main thing that carries it is the comedy part. And honestly, it wasn't that funny. I think just the fact that like it does everything a little well, which is enough for me to recommend it.
I mean, it's like a mid-7, so that's pretty high for what you might consider a rather generic premise.
We
right?
also talked about this too, right? Mm-hmm. Outside of the heavy hitters of Dandadan, Orb, and Blue Box, this is the highest ranked non-sequel, non-remake of this season.
Yeah. So is it worthy of that title? I know that's a very weird title to receive, but
it's good enough. It's good enough for you to pay some attention to. But that's about it, really. Moving on then to a few other things. Tying the Knot with an Amamagi's Sister, ongoing manga series of the same name by Marcy Naito, who did the story and the art. It's published in English by Kodansha USA, and this is going to be a double cur anime, so 24 or 25 episodes.
25.
Yeah. So, done by Studio Drive. Mouse score for the manga 7.52. A little bit far behind, but not too far behind. The current score for the anime is a 7.03. So this is where you take the wheel now.
Yep. So why is this manga important? Let me just mention the
manga
premise.
Or anime? Anime?
Well, no, the manga is important.
Both, really, yeah.
Because it's Marcy Naito. And why is that important? The former assistant of quintessential quintuplets.
Okay.
That's why that's important. Now, when you think quintessential quintuplets, you think of harem. And guess what? This is that too. Tying the knots with the Amamagi sisters. Who are the sisters? There's 3 of them. There's a tsundere. There is the dumb, big, well-endowed person. And then there is the kudere. Oh, surprise, surprise.
This is just quintessential quintuplets. This is just
except
cafe terrace and its goddesses.
Except they're shrine maidens this time. And then you get...
So they don't work in a maid cafe.
Yeah. And then they get the main male character that shows up because now they own the shrine, or they're trying to figure out he's going to live with them. And they all of a sudden, though, this is the premise, the main male character receives a vision that he's going to marry all 3 of them. Yep. And how do they fill in the blanks is the whole point of the anime. And they, bond and everything. That's essentially it. Do you like harems, but with a more spiritual, supernatural twist?
Let's actually sort of encapsulate this.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to recommend a harem rom-com,
yes,
would this be it?
I mean, what
else is there, right?
Oh, yeah, what else is there?
Okay, then simple. But as a harem rom-com, though, right? It's not listed as an ecchi.
No.
So it really does need to sort of pull its weight with the rom-com aspect.
Yes, and the male main character is one of those like brats that knows it all, that's super smart, that because the shrine is about to foreclose, it's about to, not foreclose, but what do you call it? Like shut down, essentially.
Okay, stop.
Yep.
This is just Cafe Goddess.
Yeah. No, I'm yeah, of course. But he's smart, bro. He's smart.
But so is the main character from Cafe Terrace and its goddesses.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's just a new flavor.
Except there is a premonition that he is going to marry all 3 of them. And then what happens? Why all of a sudden the same shrine girl, but looks a lot older, kind of shows up, but not really, and says, oh, blah, 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 and all this stuff. Yeah. So it is essentially the same thing that you know of Terrace Goddess or Quintessential Quintuplets, except you already know the ending, and there's a supernatural twist, but not a supernatural in, like, monsters show up. It's supernatural in, like, fate, the red thread of fate, shrine bullshit.
Yeah, much more lighthearted.
It's fine.
So
it's
essentially,
fine.
like, if you need to have a harem rom-com,
this is it.
But other than that...
And to be fair, this person used to be the Quintessential Quintuplets assistant.
Okay,
so
there's
they know what
some
they're
appeal
doing.
to it, right? But at the same time, probably not the highest recommend for series this season.
I think Terrace Goddess, the premise sounds more appealing, but I've read more of Tying the Knot with Amagi Sisters.
Okay.
So I don't know. It's one of those.
Right. Moving on to How I Attended an All Guys Mixer, ongoing manga series of the same name by Nana Alkawa, published in English by Square Enix. It's on Manga Up. This anime series is produced by Ashi Productions. Now, this one has a bigger score differential. The MAL score for the source, which is the manga, 7.95. Completely outranking the raw score for the anime, which is currently sitting at a 7.28. And now, I was a little bit interested in watching this, but time didn't allow for it. Jason, you did check it out, so why should I attend the All Guys Mixer?
I also read the manga and quite like it quite a bit. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Okay, the premise is simple. Will, let's say we have a third friend, so 3 of us, okay? We're going to go to a mixer event because we're a group date, okay? We go to a cafe, and we realize that there are 3 dudes sitting across from us. So we think, what the fuck's going on? We're 3 dudes that are into ladies. Aren't there supposed to be 3 ladies? Instead, there are 3 guys. And it turns out they came back. They're dressed up because they work part-time at a cross-dressing cafe where they have to pretend to be princes when they are, in fact, ladies. And it talks about the relationships between these 6 groups of people. Sorry, not these 6 people in this group, as well as the budding romance that occurs between each of them. And I guess the feelings or the mixed feelings that people get when a female character looks like a male and acts like a male and acts like a prince and acts so much suave like a gentleman does, but is also a girl and also has feelings and wants love from dudes. And hijinks ensues, romance ensues, voila. That is the story of How I Attended an All Guys Mixer. I really like the show for several reasons. The first thing is it really emphasizes the whole thing of, hey, sometimes it's just an occupational thing. And ladies are just ladies. Sure, there are people that are into the same gender. No throwing shade at that. But sometimes you just dress up as a dude because that is your occupation. And you're just really good at your job. And then on the other side, for someone like the 3 guys, they are slowly getting into the idea and being comfortable with the individual versus the looks that the other person portrays. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I'm just gonna encapsulate this and say that if you are going to watch this, especially for the 3 female leads, you're in for a pretty good time.
They're fucking awesome.
The voice actresses of Mikako Komatsu, Aoyuki, my personal favorite, and Nao Toyama. I mean, if you want to attend a mixer with Tsuyu from the Frog Girl from My Hero Academia, you want to attend a mixer with what's her name?
For which one?
Rin Shima from Yuru Camp, and you want to also have who's it? Maki Zenin from Jujutsu Kaisen. That's a pretty fucking good mixer right there.
And I have to be honest, I like the show a lot. It has a lot of charm, and it's one of those things where like when the girls end up changing out of their prince guy attire, they just look like regular girls. And also, by the way, they have always been those girls with those feelings and those problems and emotions. And I really like the show. I really like the manga. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but it's also, you don't get these kinds of shows every day.
Right. Well, we're also not going to be getting a lot of these for this season because we're not going to be talking about the first original anime for this season.
Yeah.
Negative Positive Angler, or Nega Posi Angler, an anime original that premiered on October 3rd, produced by Studio Nut. Decent stats. Not really going to go into it too much. But before we were recording this, Jason kind of gave me a quick synopsis of how the first episode ran out. And, dude, fuck this show, man. This is fucking depressing.
So... 7.13 for the anime. What is Negative Positive Angler about? If you look at the footage or like if you look at the poster, it looks
just
like
people fishing.
And technically that does happen. But our main character starts feeling really bad because they're about to be dropped out of college.
I remember you also said that they were on the verge of unaliving themselves.
Yes, and that is the first 30 seconds, and he fails. And then
he develops, or he maybe just like embellishes a gambling addiction.
No, he then goes to the hospital because he realized he has a checkup. Then the doctor says, "Oh, you have 2 years to live."
And then he goes onto his gambling addiction.
Then he goes back to the pachinko because he's heavy in debt, so he needs pachinko to kind of relieve his debt. Then he gets chased by loan sharks, jumps into the river, and then gets saved by a group of people who are bass fishing. And then slow loop happens, essentially. That's about it. There are some wacky group of characters, all with kind of a little bit of a different art style. So it kind of gives you, like, there is the flowery prince from, like, Skate Infinity. There is, like, the JoJo-looking female character called Hana. There is this weird chibi-looking woman that looks like it's drawn from Kero Kero P. And they're all in the same universe. They all work, surprisingly, at a convenience store. Who's the boss? And the boss is just, like, glasses, but you can't see the iris, that kind of look.
Yep.
And he's just super chill. And it's just about him learning to pick his life back up whilst at the same time learning how to fish.
It's a seinen, first of all, because of the fact that, there are some very seinen aspects.
Only
themes.
in the beginning, though. Then it becomes literally slow loop. And I guess they gut a fish, so they kind of show you how to gut a fish, and I guess that's a bit iffy, I guess, if you are quite squeamish. But really, it's all right. If you like slow loop, and I think slow loop roughly got the same score and same treatment thereabouts.
Thereabouts, yeah.
And I think as an anime original, you can't get that far off because you don't know what comes next, but it's also one of those slice of life edutainment shows, but about bass fishing.
So good enough, then.
It's good enough, and I think if you're into fishing, they really brush off the whole, like, emo dread thing. They have it every episode. I watched 2 episodes.
Life sucks.
Life sucks, but fishing is cool because you can think and you can have your time in the middle of the night and hang out with friends and catch fish and then cook it, what you caught, and it's nice. That kind of spiel.
Now let's get into the heavy.
Woo!
The top 3, I think, for this anime season, if you don't include sequels and remakes. We're kicking things off with Orb on the movements of the Earth. I'm not going to go over the stats and background information because you would already known about this when we talked about our ASAP.
However, one thing that we do add is that it has been confirmed to be 25 episodes, a double cur, and obviously done by Studio Madhouse.
Right. So we read. Well, I read the first 2 volumes of it.
Me too.
As a part of the omnibus, right? I didn't read much more afterwards. I guess because I was reading other stuff. But I think from that episode, everyone can hear that we were very, very hyped about Orb, and it was going to be coming out as an anime. So I watched episode 1. I think you watched 1, maybe 2 episodes. I don't think that really matters too much about whether you watch 1 or 2 because it starts off just exactly the same as how the manga plays out.
Yeah.
It keeps the same kind of pace, which is kind of like hard to really discern whether the pacing is going to be the same because you're talking about something that's on paper versus something that's on screen. But I think that it takes its time. It takes its time to brew. It takes its time to really go into like some inner monologues, character introductions, and just letting the feelings of the plot just seep in for the viewer.
And the anime score has currently an 8.18, so clearly a lot of people vibe with the anime.
I think if it's done well and it pays homage to the original source, you're going to get a few extra brownie points just because of how it presents itself, right?
Can I give you the biggest plus in the show? When Ken Suda
I knew you were going to say Ken Suda, but go on.
Yeah, when he is the guy, the let's say the guy who tortures people, that's fucking frightening.
I think if you actually, I'm not going to say more because it's going to be a bit of a spoiler. But the reveal moment of this torture is happening. But there must be an ending to it, right? No. And then cut to the next scene. So it literally is a play-by-play in terms of how it's presented in the manga, and I'm all for it. Now, this does mean that if you haven't read the manga, you may not be ready for how it's paced because it is a bit slow. But that's I guess the purpose of watching or reading Orb. You're not meant to be inundated with a fuck ton of stuff. And of course, it being a kind of consolidated, I think 8 volumes. That's it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So you know that there is a beginning and end. Therefore, like when you're reading it volume to volume, you kind of have an idea of how much more things are going to be paced out, how much more things are going to be presented. Therefore, it should translate to something of a similar pacing for the anime. So I don't think you should be discouraged by how slow it is. You rather take time to breathe it in, to take in the visuals, to just listen to Ken Suda's terrifying voice, and just feel like how this thing is going to brew and brew and brew until it reaches boiling point.
Now, that being said, Studio Madhouse, hot off the heels of Fiera and Beyond Journey's End, I have to say the production look of Orb is extremely well done, but not to the spectacle that is you would expect from Fiera and Beyond Journey's End. Is that a problem? No, it's not.
Well, that's because it's two different things.
Exactly.
One's historical, one's fantastical. And of course, you kind of have to up the fantastical nature of it, right?
Of course.
So immediately, stylistically, it's going to be very different.
Yes, it's very grimy, very, like, it's very much medieval times.
It's fucked up.
Yes.
Right? Anything you talk about back in the medieval times, if you don't add a fantasy element to it, and that being said, sometimes a lot of fantasy stuff are really fucking grim, right? So there's going to be a lot of sort of like darker tones. It's a lot more gray and brown.
Yes.
And the voices are going to be a bit more on the muted side in terms of like just delivering lines, but in a more sort of somber manner.
Yes.
There's no fun to be had in this, in the sense that like there's no happy hey thumbs up kind of moments. No, it's more just like the realization of certain things that you believe in actually might have darker underlying things that kind of change your worldview. And that's the whole premise of Orb. It's when you start understanding the importance of keeping your mouth shut.
Yes. Or, despite keeping your mouth shut, you want to let the world know the truth because that's the truth. That's the way it should be. You go against the grain and everything. What I will say, though, I think episode 3 or 4 will be the end of an arc, let's just say, right? That I think will really determine what people feel about the series long term, because 25 episodes.
I was going to say, though, with 25 episodes, do you think it'll be that soon that they're going to have that big reveal? I think they might maybe pace it out a bit more, maybe like by episode 6, really.
Oh, maybe. But I think the 25 episode announcement right off the bat, even before, the first episode premiered, gives me hope, because we thought about it, right? Like, are they going to do it all in one go? All 8 volumes? Are they even going to do all 8 volumes? It seems to me that they are very clear as to their intentions, at least judging by the double cur. What I don't know is, can you fit everything in a double cur? What I'm guessing is maybe not, but you can do 2 double curs. Or,
well, based on what has been out, right? Okay, because it is completed.
Yes.
At least with the original Japanese. The English release, basically everything will be out by the end of the year. Okay, because
you mean the manga, right?
Yes, as a manga omnibus, right? Volumes 1 and 2 was back in 2023 November, March 2024 for volumes 3 and 4, and so on and so on. By the time the last 2, 7 and 8 volumes come out, December 17. So we're about 2 months off from it. Assuming that it was going by like the English release, because for a wider audience, I think that they might have been planning things a little bit later.
Because they did that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So it would not be crazy to see them get at least the first 3 volumes, maybe even 4 volumes done by the end of the second cur. 25 episodes. It does seem rushed. It does seem, but I think that they would be able to, unless it's like, I mean, like, do you think like, I don't think that a cur per volume is the right calculation there.
I think, well, let's say 4 to 6 for the first half. I would say 4, let's say 5, okay, for half of volume 1, right? Yeah. For that story. Then the other half, let's say another 5, okay?
So then you would be able to get 4 volumes done by the end of the 25.
Right.
So okay, yeah, no, I think that the big reveal that you're talking about, without spoiling anything, yeah, maybe episode 4. I'd say, like, if they were to pace it out, then probably by episode 6, that's when, like, shit starts getting really fucking crazy.
And then you go into the other stuff, let's just say.
But at the same time, right, regardless of how they pace it out, when the big events are going to happen, I think Jason would agree that we have no issues at all in terms of recommending or on the movements of the Earth. There is absolutely no way that we would tell you not to watch it.
Yeah, and for a subject that is so dry and for a time that is so grim where like the Black Plague and things like that existed and people's knowledge versus the knowledge we have now is so different, it is such a hard pill for people to swallow, that such as myself, that don't like any of this. And I am singing this to high heavens. And I think Madhouse did an extremely good job of the adaptation. The fact that they have 2 cours of it really gives me confidence that they're really considering all of it.
I think the biggest plus point for it is the fact that it's on Netflix, which means like us the fair weather anime fan, you don't even need Crunchyroll for this.
Oh yeah, by the way, it's all on Netflix. They got it.
So I think like for the most part, generally there are going to be a lot more Netflix subscribers than there are Crunchyroll, so you don't have to worry about it. If you have Netflix already, which I think 99% of people here listening would have.
I mean, I think all of these shows that we're going to mention from here on out are on Netflix.
Yes.
Exclusively.
So you're good. Right?
So you're good. And I think
if you like just ignore everything we said previously and just start listening from here on.
don't, but if you do,
this is going to apply to you.
Yeah.
So no problems whatsoever in terms of recommending Orb. It's grim, it's dark, it's gritty, it's slow, but it's slow for a good reason because you need, a little bit of tinder to start, getting the fire going, and then once it reaches boiling point, it does not turn back.
Absolutely.
Now, we go on to the next best thing. I wouldn't say next best thing. No, it's another heavy hitter, Blue Box. So we've sung praises to high heavens for the manga when we were doing our ASAP. Not going to go over the stats and whatnot. I think the manga is still ongoing.
Yes, it is.
Which is a little bit crazy for me, but this is another double curve release.
25 episodes.
Produced by Telecom Animation Film. So the scores are kind of similar in terms of the differences between the manga and the anime. The manga is 8.14, very good, but the anime at the moment at an 8.38.
Ranked 202. That's crazy. And just to give context, if we consider non-sequels, this is the second highest rated show.
We're only going higher and higher, baby.
Yep. So Will and I have waxed lyrical and sing high praises about Blue Box in our ASAP. Please listen to that if you really want to hear all of the stuff that we have to say.
Classic love triangle, classic kind. It's not a harem at all. It's definitely a romance in the more sort of high school wholesomeness. In that you have characters who have unrequited love for one another, or you have characters who want to express love but don't know how to do it, so there's always going to be miscommunication, misunderstandings.
Or they are in love but trying to figure out how to make it work.
Missed opportunities.
Exactly.
So why is it that, you should watch, well, of course, because I fucking love the manga, and I don't say that often for romance manga.
Yeah, that is crazy in my opinion,
right?
But
to be fair, I did really like After the Rain, so that was good too. But I like it for a different reason.
Yes. However, what I will say though about Blue Box is that it looks fucking phenomenal. It is crazy good how everything looks. Everything is so bright. Everything is overly saturated in a way that it just looks really pretty. I also have to give props. One of the things I said I was super worried about was the sound effects of like the gym, of the basketball, hitting the net and hitting the ground, or the shuttlecocks with the badminton. And I have to tell you, all of that is done very, very well. All the characters act very, very well. All voice acted so well. They have a little bit of those like humorous moments, lighthearted moments, and then the art style changes to a little bit of the chibi thing, and then there's always going back to the serious thing of the oversaturatedness, and like it is so good.
Now, this is good props to the studio as well, Telecom Animation Film, because of the fact that a lot of the stuff they produced before, not necessarily highly ranked. They did Astronaut, they did Kawagoe Boys Sing, they've done, I think, some Seven Deadly Sins stuff. They actually have a Seven Deadly Sins that's out right now as well, but, because we never watched any of it, we're not talking about that. In fact, I would say that the last thing they did that is not a Lupin production was Nagatoro-san.
Right.
And then before that, Tower of God. So not necessarily the best of track records, but I think that they flipped the switch and now it's like this is your magnum opus.
Yeah. And I have to admit, 3 episodes in, all on Netflix, the quality has still persisted throughout the first episode. And you're in for a treat because everything looks really sharp, really nice. And it's the same storyline, obviously, as the manga, which has tons of accolades as it is.
Do you feel, though, that Telecom Animation is going to do this all the way through? Because it's a lot of chapters.
I think so, but also one thing I did want to mention, thank you, Will, for reminding me, was if you look at the opening credit sequence, there is actually a group of people that are not a Telecom Animation Studio people that are credited for this. For example, you would see Madbox, I guess is the name of a certain studio, and you have Wit Studio showing up in their credits. So it is very, very interesting in terms of how things go. And I think for the last kind of, I'm just looking at it right now. Yeah, Madbox as well as Wit Studio.
I mean, it's a big production.
Very big.
If you look at the production community they have Toho Animation, Shueisha, Magic Capsule, and then because the fact that there is also like a TMS involvement in there too. TMS Music, Unlimited produced by TMS, TBS is on there. It's a big production.
Yeah, and if you don't understand what I mean about the oversaturated look no further than the opening title sequence. If you think that looks good, because I think some people might think that is too much saturation, too much color, but if you like that look, that is there in spades. And I think no doubt Blue Box is going to stand the test of time if it maintains this level of quality to be one of those shows that is almost just as good as the manga is. And I'm so happy that it turned out this way.
We are going to wrap up the fall 2024 seasonal review with possibly the most hyped, the most looked forward to, and the most bombastic anime series coming out this fall, Dandadan.
Or even in recent memory, I would argue.
Ooh, it's hard. There's been a lot of really good stuff, but
True.
This is the one if you want real wacky shonen shit. So, not gonna go over the stats, but Science Saru is in the house. They are tasked with producing and working on Dandadan. So, anime score similar again in terms of like the score differentials, but the manga score is an 8.37. Currently for the anime, an 8.61, and I think it's very much justified. We're not going to go over the plot synopsis because you already know what the fuck's going on with Dandadan, but
Dandadan,
I'd say like Dandadan, oof, thumbs up.
So first of all, Dandadan, as of right now, is currently slated for 1 cour only. It is also on Netflix, and also it is the highest ranked non-sequel show. If you include sequels, is the 3rd highest show. So that says a lot about Dandadan. And when you let me illustrate, because Will and I have talked about it for ASAP. You already know our feelings on Dandadan. We've mentioned it more than ASAP. But let me tell you something, dear listeners, when something is... Okay, let me just tell you the story. A friend of mine from the U.S. has reached out to me and said, have you seen this show, Dandadan? And I haven't talked to this person in a long time, but this person knows that I do an anime podcast. So what I'm trying to illustrate here is when the permutation of people who know of Dandadan and the anime has reached a certain level of saturation of people to reach out back to me, that tells you how important Dandadan as a show is. You know what I'm trying to say?
I have a lot of friends when I was doing my coding boot camp that were also really looking forward to this. So it's not just hype on the internet. Now, on the ground, people are really looking forward to the release of this anime production. So why is it so good? Why is it so hyped? Why are people like dying to see this? Well,
because it's immensely fun.
I think that we have to give Science Saru props for fully executing on this. They retain a lot of the craziness. There are a few things that kind of have to, remove or censor. I did notice in the first episode that there were a few things that they couldn't fully do in motion because
banana.
Yeah, they couldn't show the actual full release of the banana because that's definitely not PG-13.
Yeah.
At that point, you're gonna have to start putting it on, behind paywalls, and also make sure that people are not going to be. It's a little risque.
It's risque for sure,
right? I
mean, it's not R18, but it's like very risque.
I think that there are two things that I am extremely happy about. And this is something, of course, that you would always look into when we are talking about our ASAP. How it's going to look and how it's going to sound.
Yes.
Looks-wise, it's Science Saru. It's crazy. And I think that because of how crazy a studio Science Saru is, it matches perfectly with how wacky Dandadan is.
Yes.
So no need to say anything more about that. However, the sound, I think, is 110% a perfect match.
Yes.
The voice acting, incredible.
Yes.
Right? In order to actually fully encapsulate the wackiness, you also have to have a wacky voice cast. And I don't think that you could have looked past any further than Shion Wakayama for Momo Ayase and Natsuki Hanae for Ken Takakura.
What have they done?
I'm not even going to actually look into it.
Okay.
Trillion Game, the heroine one, Near Automata for Shion Wakayama. For Natsuke, he's going to be working on Sakamoto Days. He was in Grand Blue. He was also he's Tanjiro. So
by the way, Grand Blue got a sequel. Congratulations to you, Grand Blue. I don't know how to feel about that, but
it's good.
It's fine, I guess.
But yeah, no, like these are two very hardworking, very well-respected voice actors and actresses. But just within the context of Dandadan,
then you have Nana Mitsuki. By the way,
you couldn't have picked anybody better for these particular characters. I think that so far, in terms of the voice acting, props, music. I fucking love the music. You were a little bit indifferent in terms of how the music was for the OP.
So yesterday,
and I want to hear your thoughts.
So yesterday, I told Will during brunch that I thought the music OP for Dandadan, the opening sequence, was iffy. And
controversial.
It is very controversial. I understand that.
In fact, I think that it's heresy. You even say that.
And this is coming from the artist Creepy Nuts, who did the opening theme, who also did the opening for Mashal Season 2, which I thought is one of my favorite openings of that season. So it's very odd for me to all of a sudden do a 180. However, I think the opening sequence, again, the artistic style of it, in terms of the OP, I want to be clear, this is not like splitting hairs. I really do think the sequence of it, like the aesthetic, the looks, is really good.
Yeah, but that's also then matched up with the music as well.
I understand that, and I don't like the music.
You can say that to all the 30 million people that streamed it on Spotify. I personally think it's perfect. It gives that sort of like de-Antwoord kind of remix with the aesthetic of
like psychedelic kind of
hands off of Iseken in terms of like the overflow and the complete like in your face color saturation, color changes, the dance sequences they have in between. The character reveals are a little bit different, still standard shonen. I personally think it is. If it wasn't for You Are Miss Servant, it would have been my number one OP for this season.
I also thought the closing sequence is pretty funny.
I didn't like it,
but I thought the ED, the theme, was very generic.
I didn't like it.
So there's that.
Yeah.
But everything in between, the show, is the most talked about thing. I still
think that you got it all wrong with the OP, man.
That's fair.
The OP is really good. What is it with you, man? Why don't you like it? You gotta like it. You have to like it.
I don't know. I'm not forcing it on you. I'm just telling you how I feel. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just telling you how I feel.
The music video for it debuted just 2 days ago, and it's already got 4 million views.
I get that, man.
Netflix
but don't forget,
also released the OP 2 weeks ago, and that one's got 4 million views.
This is coming from me, who also don't like Tokyo Ghoul's OP. Okay.
Yeah.
So there you go. I have weird takes sometimes, and wrong, I guess, in many people's eyes. But that's how I feel. Nonetheless, though, Dandadan is a hell of a fun ride. Do you think, though, Will, it would get a 10 out of 10 in your book? That's the question. I think a 9 out of 10 is very possible in my book. A 10 out of 10, though, would be a really tall ask in general.
I think it's hard because you're trying to put it into the context of all the shonen actions that we've watched over like the course of however many years of anime we've watched.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, it's really hard to place. I haven't given a lot of stuff 10 out of 10s recently.
Yeah.
Honestly. It's hard. And I think like, it's not so much that like we're trying to be sentimental to the stuff that we watched in the past. It's not that we're trying to put more importance on like the classic shonen bangers.
Or it's not trying to us gatekeep either.
Honestly, like the difference between a 9 and a 10 is very, very minuscule. But in order for it to be a 10 out of 10, it has to be 100% perfect. Now, the fact that there are only 3 episodes out for it, right, means of
too
course
early to tell.
Exactly. And not to mention as well that we are far from even seeing it done to fruition because it's a very young manga. So it's not it's a lot of the 10 out of 10s I've given are things that have been completed and done a long time ago. So you've had time to marinate, you've had time to absorb and really think about whether this is groundbreaking, whether this is a masterpiece. And just based on initial viewing, I've watched 2 episodes, you've watched 3, it's impossible to say if it's 10 out of 10. Just because you wouldn't feel justified giving it a complete score. You'd have to wait for every... I mean, it's the same way if you only just watched the first season of Monogatari.
Or Uzumaki.
Right? Well, Monogatari more specifically because
sure.
it's like you watched all of them, but you said there are some that are 9 out of 10s. There are some that are 7 out of 10s, maybe even 6 out of 10s. But as a whole, then you were like, you know what, this is, despite certain things not aligning with how you expected the season to play out, it's still a 10 out of 10 overall.
Yes,
right.
That is
much
how
like,
I feel.
Much like how I would say, of course, that there were certain seasons of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure that was like a 6 or a 7 out of 10. There are others that are a 9. But as a whole, one of my favorite series. Right. So it's really hard to just sit here and say straight off the bat, this is going to be a 10 out of 10. This is going to be the perfect masterpiece. And that if you're watching a shonen action, this is the one. Because that would be so unfair to all the others that have come out in the past 5 years alone.
Right.
We got Demon Slayer. We got Chainsaw Man. We got Hell's Paradise. We got Bleach. Right. And Bleach right now is like top 4. So it's
number 1 of the season.
Number 1 of the season, number 4 overall for part 3 specifically, but again, that could change because literally only a handful of episodes have come out. So 9 out of 10, absolutely. 8 out of 10 is still a very good score. It's just, of course, whether or not you are going to be comparing it to other shonens that have come out in the past, or if you put those biases aside and just analyze it for what it is this current season. An 8 or a 9. Perfectly fine. A 10 is just way too early to be giving.
Fair. That is fair. I'm just trying to get your take on it as it currently stands.
Entirely possible.
Yeah, it
but
is.
You would only know like a year or 2, maybe even longer down the road.
Yeah. What I will say though about Dandadan now is that this show is probably going to be the most talked about show this season for pretty much everyone.
Wacky opening, great music, fantastic voice acting. The visuals are just up the wazoo, and I think the biggest question that we have.
I was going to get into that. Yeah, go on.
It's going to get a second season.
So
who the fuck's going to do it?
This is the part that I'm so curious about because now that I've seen Science Saru flap their wings and show what
take on a big main series, and then like of course they've done some big things like Devilman Crybaby, Haikyuu Monogatari. Of course, you can't look past Atomic Galaxy and all that, or at least Atomic Galaxy, Time Machine Blues, right?
Which is the sequel.
Because the original was not done by Science Saru, but it was, of course,
a Yuasa production with, I think Ong Choi did produce it as well, right?
Yes. Ong Choi was kind of there from the beginning, right? But
and Ong Choi is here, by the way, as well. So
let's be real. In terms of like the track record and like the length of that track record for Science Saru, they're a 10-year studio, and then they also got bought out, right? So they're no longer just operating solely science. I think it was Toho.
Yes.
So moving forward, we have no idea what's going to happen, but we do know that in a year, maybe 2 years, at least it's slated for 2026. That Science Saru is going to also be working on Ghost in the Shell, or whatever version of Ghost in the Shell.
Whatever that is, right?
Right?
Yeah.
So we have no clue in terms of how long this is going to run as a Dandadan cross collaboration with Science Saru. Because Science Saru historically has never done a sequel.
With the exception of Time Machine Blues, which is
But that's not...
That's what I mean. Technically.
But it's like not really.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of think about the longevity of this partnership and whether or not Science Saru is going to buckle down and actually produce Dandadan into complete fruition. I think it would be a good move because it's about time they started working on something that wasn't an original, that wasn't an obscure manga or like a campus novel
or like an
anime.
artsy kind of thing. Not saying that they don't excel in that area, but sometimes at the end of the day, you need to pay the checks. Sometimes you need to keep the lights running, and when you have a property that you excel at that is also hyped and popular, and your big brother Toho is telling you to do it, I think it would be very unfortunate if Science Saru did not continue the Dandadan train based on what we have seen.
Again, we also don't know like how the working relationship between Toho and Science Saru is.
This is purely speculation from Will and my standpoint, right?
What I will say though is that in this moment, in this particular season, all the way up until the end of fall 2024, if there is an anime that you're going to watch that is not a sequel, that is not a remake, it's got to be Dandadan.
I would agree. I think Dandadan and Blue Box is two sides of the same coin, with Orb being technically the third hidden brother, if you will.
Yeah, it's not like we need to put them on a pedestal and rank them like from second and first, but if you had to just pick one,
I would say Dandadan.
Yeah.
Again, in my opinion,
it depends on what mood you're in.
Exactly. That's what I would say. It as like
if you want something that's a little bit slow and mysterious, suspenseful, and
serious too,
then Orb, right? If you want something that's a bit more sort of like slow paced, but like just watching childhood innocence grow into misunderstood romance,
and you don't like shonen action,
and you just want something chill, Blue Box.
But if you
just want to pour bleach in your eyes and then sit on a merry-go-round and just spin, come back, watch something, punch yourself in the nuts, and then that's fucking Dandadan.
That's fucking Dandadan. And that is the end of our fall 2024 seasonal review. I know we went over a decent amount of shows today, but Will, other than the top 3 shows that we mentioned, I would like to shout out Ranma Half especially. I think Ranma Half is one of those shows that I actually wasn't even intended to even talk about on this show or watch, and it somehow seeped its way in, and I think it's a very good show.
I give a shout out to You Are Miss Servant just for the OP alone.
Yeah, and I think also it is one of the highest rated non-sequel shows as it is, and I think I will check it out also myself. I just didn't have the time. But what I hope all of you listeners have the time for is listening to this episode of the Good Anime Palette podcast. If you would want to, we greatly appreciate you leaving a ratings or review on your podcast listening platform of choice. If not, we thank you for listening nonetheless. I would like to take this opportunity to shout out a special Peruvian welcome to some of our listeners who are from Peru. We have gotten an influx of Peruvian listeners.
We're number 1.
Yeah, congrats to us, and thank you for listening. We hope you continue to listen. If you want to reach out to any of us and either of us and see what we have installed for you guys, you can always reach us through our email, gapalette@gmail.com, GAPALETTE, all lowercase, all one word, using the handle @PaletteGood, capital P and capital G, all one word. All of our invite links and all of our other social media are in the show description. We also have a website, www.goodanimepalette.com, all lowercase, all one word. Music credits for this episode. Our intro music is Married to the Light by oomiee. Our break music is Green Summer Waves by Kyo. And our outro music is Weeping by Cushy. You can always support the music artists that we feature by listening to them on Spotify, Apple Music, or your music listening platform of choice. And Epidemic Sound provides all of our royalty-free music. If you're interested, you can sign up using the referral link in our show description. Terms and conditions apply.
I'm actually just gonna say this. It is insane that we're like the number 1 anime and manga podcast for Peru, even though we don't speak Spanish.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of cool. I don't know how that happened. I'm glad it happened. And it's not like we haven't been in similar rankings in other countries, but this one just came out of nowhere, and we are pleasantly surprised, and we welcome all of you on board.
So what's the takeaway for this season? I mean, it's
the reminder season, as I said. I think that's honestly how it is.
Yeah, but of course, amongst all of the sequels and all of the remakes, there are, of course, some clear heavy hitters that you should definitely watch, and there also are some hidden gems. A few things that you might not look because of the fact that it's kind of buried under all of the heavy hitters, right?
I think it is. If we look at any given anime seasonal offerings, right? this season has the biggest, clearest gap of if you like your sequels, it's there. If you have the top 3 shows, for us, it is Orb, Blue Box, and Dandadan. Not in that order, right? But just those 3, right? I would say is like our top 3. And then you have all the other shows that are not necessarily bad, but they probably on their own, they're fine, but they pale in comparison to all the sequels because everyone else already are following it because they're dedicated, or the other 3 that we just mentioned.
Yeah. And also, of course, we probably should have said this at the beginning, but there are definitely shows that we didn't cover that aren't sequels, that aren't heavy hitters, and that aren't remakes. It's just we don't have the time. So, yeah.
I mean, that may not be an excuse in your eyes, but it's also just because we want to cover as much as we can given the limited time that we have. And sometimes we can only get around to so many shows within the period of time that we have. That's about it.
So there's things like, for example, like Blue Mibaru that we could have watched. We could have watched Demon Lord 2099, but time didn't allow, unfortunately.
And that being said, if there is any shows that you think we should check out, you can contact us, and then maybe we will put it in one of our upcoming episodes because you guys shouted out. And things that we feel that you give us the wrong, we have the wrong take on, because I'm sure my opinion of Dandadan is hotly contested already by Will and others. So
30 million plays on Spotify, my guy.
I know. So I'm not denying that, bro. But that being said, that is the end of the fall seasonal review for us. Will, do you have any parting thoughts for this seasonal?
Boot up Netflix. Just go and watch the shit, dude. There's so much on Netflix.
Yeah. I mean, what else is there to say?
Bye.
Bye.